So, schönen guten Abend, ihr Lieben. Wir sind live in nicht Last Epoch und auch eigentlich nicht so richtig im Path of Exile. Aber heute ist der Reveal vom nächsten Patch. Der Patchname ist bekannt, Crucible. Und wir gucken dann mal, was da heute uns präsentiert wird. Und sind im Discord mit dem Brainy und sind gespannt, was da auf uns zukommt. So. Dann jetzt wieder rein hier.
So, bist du jetzt on oder was?
Wir sind live.
Aufliegen.
4 Minutes. Drei Minuten noch, Dirk.
Du hast es dann in deinem Stream geteilt, ja?
Ja, das ist offen.
Ja. Ach, du bist ja auch mitten im Bild. Ach du Scheiße.
Ich bin auch dabei.
So, ich hab Darts auf der einen Seite und dich auf der anderen Seite.
Schön. Ja, da können wir uns jetzt nur überraschen lassen, was uns da präsentiert wird. Hoffentlich viele Quality of Life Upgrades für den Multiplayer.
Ja. Ja, und vielleicht auch ein paar Skill-Änderungen oder neue coole Skills, so AE-Skills irgendwie besser.
Ja, oder eine neue Righteous Death Oath Fire.
Ja.
Oder Death Oath als Skill. Also Death Aura.
Umwandlung in Feuer.
Ja, oder Death Aura als Skill. Skin.
Ja. Aber stell dir mal vor, Death Aura macht 50% mehr Schaden.
Ja.
Basis.
Ja. Ja, dann muss man das mit Righteous Fire nochmal überdenken.
Dann wird's kriminell.
Wenn man dann vielleicht auch eher einen Righteous Fire hochspielt, wenn der Dude bleibt und dann danach einen Death Aura Charakter macht. So, dann schweigen wir gleich alle mal.
Na, ich sag bestimmt zwischendurch mal so was wie, oh, das ist geil. Oder,
Oder, weiß ich schon. Ja, oder irgendwelche Affengeräusche.
Ich mach so Geräusche wie bei Herr der Ringe hier, diese Ugoks oder wie.
Ja, ist mir schon klar. Oder testen, mein Herr, mein Schatz. Heißt denn testen?
Das überlasse ich dir.
Ja.
Alles Gollum-artige
Ich spiele den Gollum, genau. Ja, jetzt.
Jetzt mache ich selber mal meinen Stream-Sound hier aus. Zum Darts. Ton ist bei dir an, ne?
Ja.
Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Thanks for joining us for today's live stream as we unveil Path of Exile Crucible, which launches on April 7th on PC and Mac and on April 12th on console. Twitch drops are enabled on today's live stream, so make sure you follow the instructions below in order to claim your Sphinx wings. Speaking of live streams, this is our last dedicated Path of Exile 1 announcement stream for around 6 months. That's because our 3.22 expansion announcement will occur during the ExileCon livestream in late July. Set yourself a reminder to tune in, because we'll also be unveiling massive amounts of information about Path of Exile 2, including revealing the date that its beta will start. Okay, back to today's livestream. Here's what you can expect. We'll start with a trailer for Crucible, followed by a deep dive on the League itself. Then we'll cover this expansion's endgame improvements, including the introduction of Atlas gateways and revamps to both Breach and Abyss leagues. We'll discuss changes to Path of Exile's balance metagame, including changes to the passive skill tree, its masteries, an overhaul of the Saboteur and Pathfinder Ascendancy classes, 9 powerful new Val skills, and some of the new unique items you can build around. After that, we'll cover improvements to the Ruthless game mode and the League launch boss kill event, before diving into the new Supporter Pack series. The livestream will then conclude with a Q&A session between Ziggy D and me, where we'll answer questions from Twitch chat. After the livestream, we'll drop the full patch notes. Let's get started with the trailer for Path of Exile Crucible.
Hail, one of many. Eons ago, my kind walked the molten surface of this world. Now, we seek a champion. You must endure the heat of the Crucible. To forge weapons unlike any Rayclast has ever seen. Take up the power of the Titans and bring obliteration.
In Path of Exile Crucible, you'll learn about an ancient race of titans who once shaped the primordial surface of Rayclast. In this league, you will earn the ability to forge their power onto your weapons. And what form does that power take? In an iconically Path of Exile way, it's the ability to imbue your weapons with their own passive skill trees. These Crucible trees can have quite an impact on your character build. For example, in addition to the regular mods on this bow,
Richtig
the
geil.
Crucible tree grants additional physical damage, physical to chaos conversion, the Master Fletcher notable passive,
Ja.
improved grace effect, and level 10 lesser multiple projectiles. While this is certainly a decent tree to get, it's not even the maximum depth and could be even more optimized for your build. In order to forge these powerful trees onto your
Hab ich
weapons,
schon
you need
richtig
to
geil
complete
gesagt?
Crucible encounters. There's one in each area. Each encounter takes place at a Crucible forge. As you approach the forge, you'll have the choice of which of your equipped weapons you want to focus on. This can include ones on your alternate weapon swap if you want to improve one you're not currently using. After selecting a weapon, you channel it at the Crucible forge to spawn monsters. The longer you channel for, the more dangerous and rewarding the encounter becomes. As you spawn additional monsters, they combine together to create larger and more fearsome foes that grant even more experience for your Crucible passive tree. Being able to ramp up the difficulty of the encounters is a double-edged sword. While it gives you the opportunity to make rapid progress on your Crucible weapon crafting projects, it comes with significant risk to your character. It's easy to accidentally overwhelm yourself and make an encounter that is too dangerous. Channel carefully and adapt to what your character is capable of. When you first find a weapon, it doesn't have a Crucible tree unlocked. Channeling that weapon at Crucible encounters will unlock and reveal its tree, as well as allocating the first skill. You can only allocate one skill at each tree depth, so you'll need to decide which path through the tree is best for your build. As you get deeper into a tree, more and more experience is required to unlock skills. The final depths can take quite an investment and can only be found rarely on endgame items, but also have some of the most powerful properties. For example, this wand has 2 depth 5 skills to choose from. One of them allows all damage from your Freezing Pulse and Eye of Winter skills to poison, and the other allows various brands to be attached to your Summoned Reaper. There are many such modifiers to skills that will enable very interesting build combinations. In addition to all types of weapons, shields can also be empowered with their own Crucible trees. Here's a relatively simple low-level example. It gets a bit crazier as you approach the endgame. Speaking of the endgame, in endgame Crucible encounters you'll occasionally find igneous geodes, currency items that can be cracked open to reveal a primeval remnant. This is a map-like item that grants access to the Forge of the Titans, the culmination of your Crucible journey. These primeval remnants always generate as rare items. Half of their mods are upsides and half are downsides. The upsides generally increase the rewards of the area or add special crafting options. For example, causing monsters to drop divination cards or magmatic ore, a form of tradable itemized Crucible tree experience. The downsides are quite punitive compared to most endgame maps. Ideally, you want to find a primeval remnant that is really rewarding upsides alongside downsides you can handle. If you don't think you'll survive a visit to the Forge of the Titans, trade the remnant away to someone else and gamble on cracking open another geode. If you survive and manage to reach the end of the area, you'll find the aforementioned Forge, which allows you to merge Crucible trees on 2 items together. The way this process works is that you provide 2 items of the same class. For example, a pair of bows, a pair of shields, or a pair of one-hand axes. One of these items will be melted down and applied to the other, which will keep its regular properties. Their Crucible trees will be merged together in an unpredictable way, taking elements of each one. This is a little reminiscent of how recombinators applied to item mods, taking parts of each Crucible tree and merging them together, as well as randomly upgrading, downgrading, or mutating skills on the resultant tree. While this process can create some really powerful trees if you get skills you wanted from both items, it can also completely wreck your precious trees, so take care choosing which you risk combining. Also, like recombinators, there are ways to manipulate the system to improve your odds at getting certain outcomes. For example, any skills that have been allocated are more likely to show up in the resultant Crucible tree. By default, you can only add Crucible trees to non-unique items, but it's possible to get a mod on the Forge of the Titans map that allows you to imbue a unique item with a Crucible tree, which can then be leveled up via regular Crucible encounters. To combine Crucible trees on unique items together, you'll want to find a crystalline geode and crack it open to reveal the secret higher level version of the Forge of the Titans. I probably shouldn't say too much about it, but it will let you do some interesting things with Crucible trees. There's an important thing to note about Crucible trees on unique weapons. In addition to being much harder to unlock, there's a special rule about how they can be combined. A unique weapon must be combined with another copy of the same unique weapon to merge their trees together. Because this destroys one copy, getting a good Crucible tree on a unique weapon makes it insanely valuable. It may also raise the trade value of all unique weapons by quite a lot, as players sacrifice them trying to create perfect Crucible trees. Occasionally, you'll find a Crucible passive skill tree with a special skill that indicates that the item will sell to vendors for a specific item in addition to its regular sale price. These vendor skills usually occur relatively deeply in the tree, so take some effort to allocate, but usually don't block skill choices you'd make when leveling the item up for use. The presence of these skills presents you with an interesting choice about whether you want to use the item or sell it to a vendor, and whether you want to spend your Crucible experience either revealing new trees to hunt for good skills, leveling up items to use, or leveling up items to sell. Crucible also features its own unique items you can earn. For example, El Abin's Visage, a unique helmet, is special in that it's the only armor piece other than shields that can receive Crucible passive skill trees. Wearing it allows you to double down on certain properties that are only available through these trees. There are several other unique items exclusive to Crucible for you to discover in this league. Crucible is a dual combat crafting league with a focus on encounter difficulty scaling and deep weapon customization with a power level that we have never seen before. Without a doubt, some of Path of Exile's most powerful weapons will be forged in Crucible. We can't wait to see what you manage to create. Like all recent Path of Exile expansions, Crucible includes a lot of changes with the goal of improving Path of Exile's endgame. One area we wanted to address was mobility on the Atlas passive tree. Often, you'll find yourself in a situation where you want to specialize in leagues that are on entirely different sides of the Atlas tree. Or maybe you want to focus on the type of altar that isn't near the leagues you have picked. To solve this, Path of Exile Crucible introduces Atlas gateways. These are nodes that you can allocate on the Atlas tree that allow instant travel between two locations. There are 3 pairs of gateways, each allowing travel from the left side of the tree to the right side or vice versa. Each end of the gateway consumes 1 Atlas skill point to allocate, but will potentially save you large amounts of travel points. In this expansion, we're targeting a couple of
quality of life
leagues that have
feature.
fallen behind other leagues on the Atlas tree. Let's start with Breach. In the live version of Path of Exile, there are 5 tiers of Breach Stone. In Path of Exile Crucible, we're raising the area levels of Breach Stones to a much higher baseline level. 81 for elemental ones, 82 for physical, and 83 for chaos. Now that the regular breach stones are much higher level, we have retired charged, enriched, and pure breach stones. They will be converted to regular ones. We have also changed how flawless breach stones are acquired. Previously, you could only get them from Maven invitations, but we prefer access to the hardest breach content to actually come from playing breach. Now there are 2 ways to get flawless breach stones, through blessings, which are now rarer as a result, and through a skill on the Atlas tree. We've also improved the pacing of breach encounters. Previously, breaches felt pretty good early on, but quickly tapered off in density to the point where you wanted to abandon the breach because it just felt like not enough monsters were spawning. Our changes now keep breaches feeling dense throughout, leaning more on the side of it feeling overwhelming towards the end of the breach. We have also reduced the duration of breaches so there is constant monster pressure and you can get on with your mapping sooner. There are a whole bunch of other breach changes that you can read about in the patch notes, such as changes to the Betrayal Research Safe House, Breach Scarabs, Breach Stones from Kirik missions, the Breach Harvest crafting option, the Fragment Stash tab, Divination cards, Breach unique items, Atlas passives, and so on. We're also revamping Abyss in a similar way. Abyssal Depths now always contain an Abyssal Lich. Previously, the prevailing gameplay was to check the loading screen art of an Abyssal Depths to see if it contained a Lich, and bail out if it didn't. Now, the depths always contain a Lich, removing the need for this step. While the rate of encountering Abyssal Liches is unchanged, Abyssal Depths are rarer than before. However, Abysses now have a chance to spawn a Stygian Spire in place of their reward chest, which will drop all of the jewels and other items you'd normally receive, as well as a Stygian Vice. In addition, you're guaranteed to always get a 4-hole Abyss alongside your Abyssal Depths. Previously, Abyssal Depths could only spawn immediately after a single Abyssal hole, which prevented you from getting full value from the Abyss. The Lightless Legion notable passive has been replaced with a new skill which grants Stygian Spires in your maps drop items with +1 to item level. This is intended to allow players to continue to be able to obtain item level 86 Stygian Vices and other base types as a reward for specializing in Abyss. The small passives leading up to this notable passive have also been replaced. We've done a balanced pass on Abyssal Lich encounters to make them more appropriately difficult relative to the current standard of endgame encounters. Abyss uniques have had some balanced attention also, and the details are in the patch notes. Overall, these changes should ensure you can play a wider variety of leagues in the endgame, both through being able to access them more easily and because Breach and Abyss now feel far more modern and competitive with other popular
Breach gefällt mir ganz gut mit der Density.
A big goal of the Crucible expansion is to provide a lot of new ways to build characters and to breathe new life into older builds.
To achieve this, we're doing 2 things. Firstly, we have created many more interesting options for one of Path of Exile's core build systems, the passive skill tree, by overhauling many of its masteries. Secondly, we have revamped 2 specific ascendancy classes. As we reviewed the masteries on Path of Exile's passive skill tree, we realized that a lot of the choices were rather bland and could be a lot more exciting. We went through the masteries one by one and tried to come up with as many interesting stats as we could, ignoring what was currently there.
Once we had a short list of high-quality stats, we added in the existing ones that used to be on each mastery and picked the 6 best. All of the leftover ones have been saved for later or used in places like unique items. This process was performed on approximately half of the masteries on the tree, initially targeting the ones that needed the attention the most. Previously, some masteries only had 4 options, so we've tried to increase as many as possible to 6 options.
We've also added a couple of new mastery types that we felt were missing. Let's look at an example, the life mastery choices. You can see some of the interesting new options, such as the ability to manipulate your low life and full life thresholds, which allows you to more effectively use the damage while on full life support gem and many unique items. Getting a large increase to maximum life when you have no life on your body armor not only works really well with a whole lot of unique items, but also opens up new prefix composition options for rare body armors. Here you can see the armor and energy shield mastery has more options available than before. The other thing we focused on with this one is tying the mechanics together better. Instead of some being about armor and some being about energy shield, we've tried to make sure each really emphasizes having both armor and energy shield. On the Leech Mastery, we've combined the 3 increased life mana and energy shield recovery stats into one choice that affects all of them. The space we've freed up has been used to add some powerful new options, such as a portion of your Leech applying instantly. The Spell Suppression Mastery also has many interesting options. Your chance to suppress spell damage becoming lucky is extremely useful before you've optimized your gear and haven't reached 100% yet. The third option rewards you for stacking more than 100% spell suppression, which previously had few benefits. Now it's something you can plan your itemization around. While looking at masteries, we noted that there were some mechanics that didn't have enough passive tree support, so we decided to add some more options and passive skill choices for those mechanics. We also wanted to grant more access to certain types of masteries in specific parts of the passive skill tree. For example, in order to allow more access to the attack mastery, we've added an attack cluster by the Templar and one between the Ranger and Shadow. We wanted to create more access to other forms of recovery such as regen and recoup, so we've added some new passive skill clusters. Note that there is now a new mastery called Recovery. We've also added more capacity for investment in certain mechanics that we felt could be improved, such as link skills, stun mitigation, and marks. These mastery improvements and passive tree changes are just some of the ones introduced in Path of Exile Crucible. We look forward to your feedback on the rest when you check out the passive skill tree next week. While going through Ascendancy classes, we identified 2 that needed work, the Saboteur and the Pathfinder. Both have been significantly changed in Path of Exile Crucible. These changes reinforce their respective identities while adding some new options to build around. The Saboteur is definitely the Ascendancy class most aligned with traps and mines, but the old version of the Saboteur made it difficult to play anything but traps or mines. The new version has more builds available, including a whole new specialization, triggers. There are 2 notable passives that help with this. Like Clockwork grants you the increased cooldown recovery rate stat, which is a pretty rare one. This is great for triggered spells as it indirectly increases their damage. This notable also makes your enemies have longer cooldowns, which can be useful in certain boss fights, for example causing the Maven's memory game to occur less often. The Perfect Crime notable passive summons 2 trigger bots, which override the location of where a triggered spell is being cast, and instead causes it to trigger twice, once from each of their locations. The layout for the Saboteur's Trap and Mine Ascendancy passives has changed, so that there aren't separate 4-pointers for traps and mines. Now each one has a 2-pointer that is connected to the same shared 4-pointer. We have also completely reworked Bomb Specialist to be specifically tied to area damage, so it's a slightly more
Ja,
skill.
war gerade. Ist aber
It
jetzt wieder
gives you
weiter.
some area damage as well as some defense against incoming area damage against you. The Pathfinder has been overdue for some attention, especially with recent features such as concoction skills that she could get the ability to specialize in. We also wanted the Flask-themed Ascendancy to have a proactive way of improving Life Flask usage. Master Distiller allows you to turn most of your skills into concoction-like effects. Master Surgeon now effectively gives all of your Life Flasks the Enduring effect, previously only found on Mana Flasks. Finally, both of the major Flask-themed branches now have some form of Flask Charge recovery. There are other improvements to the Pathfinder Ascendancy, such as Nature's Reprisal, now interacting with Wither to improve all forms of your chaos damage, rather than just attack forms of it. Check out the full details in the patch notes that we'll be posting after the livestream. Path of Exile Crucible introduces 9 new Val skills. Last expansion, there was an emphasis on melee Val skills. In Crucible, we're making sure that many other types of builds get new skills to build around. Val skills let us introduce quite powerful effects that we couldn't normally give to a regular skill that can be used constantly. They also implicitly act as a buff to the underlying skill. Val Absolution upgrades one of your Sentinels of Absolution into an Apparition of Innocence. You can only have one apparition at once, but just check out these massive AoE skills it uses. Vaal Arctic Armor instantly encases you in ice, preventing non-instant actions including movement, but granting massive damage reduction against hits. After a short duration, it also starts to regenerate your energy shield and mana at a fast rate. Both the damage reduction and regeneration last for a few seconds, or until you have been hit 3 times. It cannot be manually cancelled. Because this skill is instant, it's a great emergency button against dangerous boss slams. It also makes you count as being frozen, despite Arctic Armor normally making you freeze immune. Having another way to self-freeze may be of interest to a few mad scientist build creators in the community. Vaal Lightning Arrow fires a barrage of piercing projectiles that cause lightning to strike nearby targets whenever they hit an enemy. After a short amount of time, or when they collide with terrain, the arrows randomly change direction and continue flying. This occurs a number of times before the arrows expire. Each arrow can hit the same target once per redirect. Because the arrows travel for a set time before redirecting, rather than a set distance, projectile speed modifiers affect the distance traveled. High projectile speed lets you clear out huge areas with them, while reducing your projectile speed increases the chance of them hitting the same target multiple times. With very low projectile speed, the skill can hit a single target 20 plus times. Vaal Reap conjures a ring of scythes that deal damage to all enemies in a circular area. The scythes leave behind a pool of blood that deals heavy physical damage over time to enemies standing in it, and for a short duration after they leave it. Vaal Reap instantly grants a large number of the blood charges used by normal Reap on use, as well as temporarily higher maximum blood charge capacity, substantially powering up the regular version of the skill. Path of Exile Crucible introduces 5 other Vaal skills we'll reveal over the next week: Vaal Animate Weapon, Vaal Domination, Vaal Ice Shot, Vaal Rejuvenation Totem, and Vaal Firestorm. This expansion also introduces more than 10 new unique items. There are 3 in particular I'd like to show you today. Blood Price is a unique helmet that has a new effect, reserving enemy maximum life. This does exactly what it implies, causing nearby enemies to start at 92% maximum life. While this increases your clear speed against all enemies, it's especially useful against bosses. The helmet's drawback is that it reduces your maximum life, but provides decent life regeneration and block and stun recovery to counteract this. Tainted Pact is an amulet that causes chaos damage over time to heal you while you're leeching life. While the amulet provides a decent amount of life leech itself, it'll certainly require a few tricks to unlock its full potential. Widow Hail is a unique bow that is different from any other bow in Path of Exile. As a weapon, it does basically no base damage and doesn't grant any stats of its own, but it does dramatically increase the power of mods provided by your quiver. Needless to say, this could produce some pretty ridiculous outcomes with good rare or unique quivers. We'll reveal some of the other new uniques over the coming week. Ruthless is a game mode that we released alongside the Sanctum expansion late last year. It's designed around extreme item scarcity and is challenging because you're constantly behind the item power curve. So far, it has found a very passionate audience of players who love how rewarding item drops feel in such an austere environment. We have some small improvements to Ruthless in Path of Exile Crucible. Firstly, Eternal Orbs are back in Ruthless. These are an extremely powerful currency item that allows you to imprint an item and restore it if you're unhappy with the result of crafting. We disabled these game-wide 7 years ago because they were far too powerful when combined with all of the different crafting options Path of Exile offered at the time. Ruthless does not have the base game's crafting feature set, so we have enabled Eternal Orbs to drop in Ruthless, albeit extremely rarely. Ruthless now has its own set of challenges to complete. Like the ones in early Path of Exile, there were a total of 8, and they're very difficult. Like we've done in the past, we're hosting a boss kill event at the start of the Crucible Challenge League. It'll be held in Ruthless Hardcore Solo Self-Found, and will require you to kill both the Uber Searing Exarch and the Uber Eater of Worlds, making it by far the hardest event we have ever run. The first place winner will get to work with our design team to add a new unique item to Path of Exile. They'll also receive a transferable Ultra VIP ticket to ExileCon in July. If they aren't able to attend or already have a ticket, then they are allowed to sell this one as they see fit. Second and third place finishers will receive a transferable VIP ticket to ExileCon that can also be sold at their discretion. If you'd like to enter the event, just create a character in Ruthless Hardcore Solo Self-Found on launch day. Best of luck to everyone. On the weekend of July 29 to 30 New Zealand time, which is July 28 to 29 for much of the rest of the world, we're going to be hosting ExileCon 2023 in Auckland, New Zealand. While tickets to the in-person event are very hard to get, we'll be streaming the entire event for free. At ExileCon, we'll reveal our latest updates on Path of Exile 2, Path of Exile Mobile, and the next Path of Exile 1 expansion. Make a note in your calendar, tell your friends, and don't miss it. The second day of the Path of Exile livestream culminates in a competitive race event between some of Path of Exile's best players. In order to select the 4 competitors, we're going to run qualifier events during the months of April and May. The winner of each event will receive a VIP ExileCon ticket, return flights to Auckland and accommodation, and will compete in the race event live on stage. All 4 qualifiers in the final event will be run on the 3.21 version of Path of Exile, which has received a fair amount of early game balance work that will change the racing meta quite a lot. You'll be able to read more in the patch notes. Once 3.21 releases next week, you'll be able to solve the new meta, practice hard, compete in the qualifier events, and hopefully win your place on stage in July. Alongside Path of Exile Crucible, we're introducing a few new types of microtransactions. An example I wanted to describe today is that of mannequins. These are hideout decorations that you can place to show off sets of microtransactions you have assembled. You can equip them with your spare micros and pose them in various ways. It's also possible to swap your entire outfit with a mannequins one, which lets you easily store micro sets to be retrieved later. Other new microtransactions coming up include wrapping paper, which lets you gift wrap items to hand to other players, or even drop in town for random people to pick up. Today we're launching 2 new series of supporter packs, the Lithomancer and Enchanter packs. Each tier contains the pack's full face value in points, alongside several exclusive microtransactions. These packs are only available for the duration of the Crucible League, and will leave the store forever when it ends. As always, the microtransactions in these packs are purely cosmetic and do not affect your character's power or progression in any way. The Lithomancer series of supporter packs contains 6 exclusive microtransactions. The Tunnel Bear isn't just adorable, he will also take the place of the Crawler in Delves, lighting your surroundings and laying down cables. Apparently, this is what happens when your bear gets into a kilo of sulfite. Might explain what happened to Nico. The Ring of the Demon Slayer attempts to exorcise rare and unique demons when you hit them. The souls of defeated demons are banished to the depths below. The ancient stone of the Lithomancer's armor set crumbles when you take damage, revealing the crimson core inside. The stone reforms if you haven't taken damage recently. A sip from the ancestral granite flask causes a Karui ancestor to appear and surround you in protective wards. The ancestral portal encases you in molten armor when you travel through it.
Kalamawano, warrior.
The summoned Karui ancestor rallies you to battle and honestly seems to have an unhealthy obsession with combat.
Go forth and conquer.
Ever want to practice running away from volatiles? The gunpowder foot attachment straps explosives to your legs, dispersing lit gunpowder behind you. Be careful, you can only outrun it for so long before it catches up. The Enchanter Pack series also has 6 exclusive microtransactions. The Parrot of Exile pet parrots your exile. We'll just let it speak for itself.
It would be wrong to do that here.
Wrong! I need more mana.
Drinking from the bottled storm jade flask encases you in a surging tornado, churning up the ground in your wake. If you stand perfectly still while wearing the enchanted armor set, it will attract butterflies to flutter around you. Be careful not to disturb them. Sick of high-fiving giant purple appendages? The Ritualist's Breach Ring visually transforms breaches you find into occult summoning circles. The Enchanter's crafting bench replaces the normal crafting bench in your hideout with a suite of tools fit for a master artisan. The various crafting stations burst into life as you use them. If you've ever wanted to remind your character who's really in charge, the Puppeteer's back attachment has you covered. It truly is the sinister presence pulling the strings. These new packs are available right now at pathofexile.com/purchase. Purchases like these directly fund the ongoing development of Path of Exile 1 and 2. Meanwhile, the Forge and Gemling packs leave the store forever at the launch of the Crucible League, so now's your last chance to purchase them. Thank you for your continued support. We're about to start the Q&A with Ziggy D. After that, we'll post the full patch notes for Path of Exile Crucible. As we approach release next week, our community team will post Crucible's challenges, information on how to update your item filters, more skill gem details, and information on how to prepare for Crucible's launch. On release weekend, we expect to launch the new Mystery Box and this season's Kerrick's Vault Pass, which can be purchased with points and has a new free track available.
Thanks for joining the stream today and checking out Path of Exile Crucible. We can't wait to forge some powerful weapons with you next week. The Q&A will start shortly, so please get your questions ready.
Ich habe mal kurz Ton ausgemacht da von deinem Stream.
Ja.
Also die Liga-Mechanik finde ich richtig gut.
Ja.
Du bist noch immuted, falls du versuchst, was zu sagen.
Achso, ja. Ich bin noch immuted, ja.
Genau, also Liga-Mechanik finde ich richtig gut. Mit dem passiven Atlas-Tree finde ich super mit diesen Gates, dass man noch von links nach rechts und so kann.
Ja.
Mit den Masteries, das muss man sich natürlich angucken.
Ja, klar.
Noch nicht wirklich bewerten. Und dann wird es natürlich spannend, was dann noch so für Unique Items kommen. Bei den Wahlskills war jetzt nicht dabei, wo ich jetzt gesagt hätte.
Also ich fand das, diesen Eisblock mehr oder weniger, fand ich richtig
Ja,
cool.
diesen Arctic Armor hat sich sehr gut angehört, das
Ja.
stimmt, ja.
Also so ein Oh-Shit-Button.
Also auch jetzt für mich, für den Serien Exile, wenn da diese Feuerbälle kommen,
Ja.
du kannst den dann einfach mal zünden, das ist natürlich schon nicht so schlecht, ja, da hast du recht.
Ja, dass man dann quasi wirklich Oh-Shit-Button hat, ne?
Ja. Aber ist dann halt wieder ein Skill, den du irgendwie mit irgendwo unterbringen musst, ne? Aber du hast ja letztens überlegt, ne? Was mache ich denn mit meinem Sockel?
Ja, genau.
Das wäre dann halt eine Alternative.
Ja.
Also gerade für Leute, die so ein bisschen Behinderung haben mit Movement und so, schon gut.
Ich weiß ja nicht, wen du meinst damit.
Gucken, ob es jetzt schon Schnauze gibt.
Ja, ich habe auch gerade geguckt, aber...
Weil ich habe ja gesagt, nach dem Links veröffentlichen sie das.
Ja, aber ich sehe nur 3.20.2c Patch Notes. Hat sich auf jeden Fall sehr interessant angehört, die Liga.
Ja, also mit diesem da aufladen und dann halt, das ist ja wie nochmal extra halt Items hochskillen, ne?
Ja,
Und das ist natürlich auch nochmal eine neue, coole Endgame-Geschichte, die man dann so hat.
ja,
Und gerade wenn du dann auch so, sag mal, jetzt bei dem Death Oath-Charakter kann ich mich ja noch daran entsinnen, dass du nochmal diesen Bogen gehabt hast halt, ne, für den Caustic Arrow, und da waren ja auch mal gute, wichtige Stats drauf, die halt auch gar nicht so einfach waren aufzukriegen, und dann musst du vielleicht mal die zusammen mergen, um dann einen besseren passiven Tree zu bekommen und so, also da hast du dann halt auch noch mehr dann im Endgame zu tun.
ja. Ja, dann ist es nicht so schnell vorbei auf jeden Fall, ne?
Ja.
Die Frage ist dann auch tatsächlich, ne, wie wollen sie sowas über Paths of Trading hier darstellen? Weil das wird natürlich, ich sag mal, schon interessant. Wenn da irgendwelche Skillpunkte noch mit drin sein sollen.
Ja, das war ja mega. Also da waren ja Sachen mit dabei, mit irgendwie ein Additional Arrow und
Ja.
du hast den Skill Resolute Technique oder on Kill Frenzy Charge, und also das ist schon... Junge.
Ja.
Das ist schon ordentlich. Gucken wir uns das gleich mit CGD noch an.
Ja, eigentlich schon.
Ist aber alles auf Englisch, ne? Aber ich gucke das eigentlich auch immer noch mit.
Ja, naja, gut. Dann ist das so, dann ist das halt auf Englisch.
Ja.
Hilft ja nur der Sprache mächtiger zu werden.
Wichtig ist es erstmal, dass der League-Content selber erstmal gut aussieht.
Genau, und dass man auch so weit wie möglich verstanden hat, ne, erstmal.
Ja.
Also so, was präsentiert wurde, und
Ja.
da wurde auf jeden Fall wieder deutlich was aufgebrochen. Und das ist ja so ähnlich, wie wo wir damals gesagt haben, ja, das wäre schön, wenn was drin kommt, im Sinne von auch Atlas passiver Skillbaum oder irgendwie sowas, und ich sag mal, sowas kriegen wir ja jetzt
Was
entsprechend.
ich halt gut finde, ist auch, dass du die Möglichkeit hast, du kannst halt den Liga-Content spielen und du kannst selber entscheiden, wie schwierig du das für dich machen möchtest.
Ja,
Ne? Desto länger du halt channelst, desto schwieriger wird's halt.
ja,
Das fand ich jetzt schon ziemlich beeindruckend. Also auch wieder die grundsätzliche Idee halt, so zugänglich wie möglich für alle halt zu machen.
Für alle, ja. Die halt noobig sind halt noobig.
Ja.
Und die Pro-Gamer sind, können halt ein bisschen mehr gleich machen, ne?
Ich channel komplett durch. Ich gehe mit Level 1 daran und channel eine Woche lang durch.
Ja. War das einfach nur.
Gerade einfach nur, ja. Bis mein Computer explodiert.
Ja, vielleicht warten wir auch einfach auf Ron oder so. Dann soll der machen. Soll er uns wieder irgendeinen Tipp geben, wie man einen +1 Fire Skill
Ja, genau.
Zepter macht. Ja, aber Patch Notes sehe ich jetzt noch nicht, ne?
Nee, ich habe auch nochmal F5 jetzt gerade geguckt, das ist noch nicht sichtbar.
Ja, müssen wir noch warten. Weil da sind sicherlich noch einige Sachen, die interessant sind, da ja irgendwie in den Patch Notes auch drin stehen. Alles kommt ja hier mal nicht mit drin vor. Es gab halt, das würde vielleicht dann auch den Rahmen sprengen.
Oh, Meta News, Chaos Orbs now stacked to 2020, das hatten wir schon gesehen. Und
genau.
Notables now show their anoint oils in
Ja, das hatte
text.
ich auch schon gesehen, ja. Was du für brauchst.
Du musst also nicht alt drücken oder so, ne?
Nee, so heißt es.
Achso, da steht dann direkt da Teal, Crimson, ja.
Ja.
Okay, dass du nicht immer von der Farbe ableiten musst, ja, was ist denn das
Was ist denn das jetzt für eine Farbe? Ich bin ja blind, ich sehe das doch ja nicht.
Ja.
Oh, jetzt.
Hey Exiles, Ziggy here. Welcome back. I'm joined here once again by Chris Wilson. How you going this morning, Chris?
Going well, thanks. Thanks for hosting.
That was a pretty spicy, hot reveal stream. The final one before ExileCon and the last reveal apart from ExileCon's reveal for PW1 potentially?
Yeah, well, we'll be having, basically, during the keynote for ExileCon, obviously we'll be dumping all the juicy Path of Exile 2 info, but after that we'll have essentially the Path of Exile 1 3.22 expansion livestream taking place from the main stage there.
The ending of an era. It's kind of bittersweet. A decade of Path of Exile action at this point, coming to a close, but moving into Path of Exile 2, obviously very exciting. So we won't be probing into that too much here because that is for ExileCon. So for now, let's talk a bit about Crucible. Has there been any reference to Titans and this very early stage of Rayclestian history before now, or is this kind of new ground that you folks are exploring this time around?
We like to come up with a mixture of taking something that's referenced and then expanding on it. And I don't want to spoil too much of the investigation of where this is referenced in the game, but we recommend looking into the Red Blade Warbands faction. That's a good breadcrumb place to pick up.
The lore experts can begin their investigations there. So the main feature, I think, of Crucible is the power that it's offering players here. How much power is there in Crucible, and are there any drawbacks to that power?
Well, you can definitely view this as pretty strict power creep on weapons, let's just say that. I mean, I'm pretty sure that there haven't been Path of Exile weapons this powerful before. So you're not sacrificing anything by having a weapon tree on the weapon, it's just purely upside. But many of the individual skills do come with their own downsides, and you can choose whether to allocate those or not. And so on a weapon by weapon and skill by skill basis, you're definitely going to have to make decisions about what's best for your build.
When it comes to designing like power that has drawbacks versus doesn't have drawbacks, how do you decide which route to go?
We feel that having hard decisions about weapons and build choices and skill use is really interesting. It causes you to have to adjust your build around drawbacks. We don't really want to make a game where you linearly just get the ability to kill monsters more quickly without having to think. We like the idea of finding a choice you can make where you're like, like this will increase my power, but I have to work around something else. Like potentially there's a skill that increases your fire damage, but makes it so that you have slightly lower fire resistance. Not a large drawback to work around, but it pauses you for a second and causes you to think, where can I get the resistance elsewhere? Now, I want to emphasize many of the skills here don't have drawbacks. This isn't like, say, Scourge, where there's a corresponding drawback to every single one. It's just the case that for the powerful ones, we've put drawbacks on them so that there's a decision that you have to make. And it's typically the ones near the end of the trees that have the drawbacks, and so they don't really block your choices very much early on.
Yeah, it feels like a big difference compared to Scourge in that regard. But I've always thought power creep is good when it's interesting, when it offers you like different decisions and an interesting extra layer of customization. Do you have any more like most ridiculously powerful Crucible trees or nodes that you've seen in testing so far?
There are some pretty cool combos. For example, if you found a skill that dramatically increases your cast speed at the cost of lowering your damage, then you may want to use, say, Summon Raging Spirits, because then your increased cast speed means you're casting way more of them, doing a lot more damage, and the decrease to your damage doesn't affect the damage of your Raging Spirits, so in that case you completely bypass that drawback and get something that's better value. We've also got some quite interesting conditional skills. Ones like, there's one I believe that grants movement speed if your dexterity is lower than 100. And so if you're able to make a build that doesn't have 100 dexterity, like for example you're just pure intelligence or pure strength, then you can easily take advantage of just a free movement speed boost.
I wonder what the option is for low int characters. Could something like this ever go core in Path of Exile, or is it just too powerful? Like, it seems, I look at this and I think, no way is that going core.
We intentionally do not have any discussions internally about whether something's going core until we've let people actually play the league and get some feedback on it, because it's premature if we think, yeah, this can go core, and then everyone hates it, or vice versa, then that's an issue. So we throw it out there, see what people think. When we do integrate leagues with the base game, we typically do make changes to make them appropriate for integration, like one of the many topics for this coming year is what are we doing about Sanctum, for example, and certainly there's discussion there about how we would make Sanctum appropriate for base game integration if it is going core.
With these items having these Crucible trees and everything, maybe the league doesn't go core, but these will go to standard in some capacity. Will they work in standard? How will that work?
They will work in standard, yes. So you can rip them from hardcore to standard right away.
It's going to be good fun.
It's worth noting you can't level them up or allocate nodes any further in standard. Like, you probably want to get the tree allocated correctly before you do ref it to standard. But yeah, you can use those skills over there.
I imagine there's a lot of experimentation as well, because you potentially want to, like, looking at the end game of this is to level up multiple different weapons, selecting the best nodes, and then combining them together until you get like a blend of your perfect ideal nodes. And I imagine that could take a while to get the perfect one.
Certainly, yeah. There's a lot of cool stuff that can happen that we learned from recombinators. So there's quite a big grind to get perfect stuff, and then when you're looking at it on uniques, for example, the grind is even larger. Like, we're really excited to some extent about how the concept of, let's say you want to have a like Starforge or something that's got the best tree on it. How would you actually do that? And it requires quite a concerted effort from most of the community of online players to achieve that, but possible.
Now, can you respec or change those Crucible node allocations?
Yeah, if a skill has been allocated, like as in you've chosen the skill, you've got all the experience towards it, you're gaining the benefit from it and so on, then you can scour it with an orb of scouring. So that will unallocate that last node there. And then for the ones that you're working towards that you haven't allocated yet, you can instead retarget the effects, the efforts of the next Crucible encounter you do towards a different node. And I wish I had a graph up so I could demonstrate it. But essentially, if I'm halfway through leveling up to one of the two choices I have at a certain intersection, and I instead want to work towards the other one, I can just freely swap across. And once it's allocated, I have to use a scour to undo it and get that experience back.
Excellent, that makes sense. Are the nodes available on two-handed weapons more powerful than one-handed weapons? Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I was just doing a quick dev check to make sure I wasn't making stuff up. Nodes on two-handed weapons are more powerful than one-handed weapons. You could think of it as, broadly speaking, if you have a two-handed weapon, you're getting the same rough power that you would from having a one-handed weapon dual-wielded or with a shield.
Certainly makes sense, and that kind of like feeds into the next question, like quivers aren't craftable because a bow is a two-hander and gets that power level, I assume.
Correct, yeah. We had the choice there of, do we want a bow to be balanced like a one-hand weapon or balanced like a two-hand weapon? And we thought, well, probably balance it like a two-hand weapon and just ignore quivers. It means that we can double down on having powerful bow effects, and players only have to, in that case, craft a tree on one item.
Did you ever feel like maybe we should give a special exemption to face breakers and similar items that have you not equip a weapon?
It's being discussed, but there's We don't want to have a philosophy that every Path of Exile league must work on literally 100% of builds to its fullest potential, because that really constrains us to really watered down leagues. So in a case here where a Facebreaker character potentially just doesn't get a boost like the other characters do, I mean, they can still play just like they could last league, except they're not getting to enjoy the, the main hand weapon damage they're getting from this. They can obviously still craft a shield or various unique items.
Yeah. Now, Crucible's like these passives specific to weapon types. I assume bows and melee weapons will have different nodes because they want different things. But what about like swords compared to axes, or minion ones compared to non-minion ones?
Yeah, so essentially weapon types do have mod restrictions. So the examples you give are reasonable. The bows and melee weapons have different ones. Minion ones, caster ones, bows all have their own special passives. I believe in Path of Exile there isn't a lot of direct difference between swords and axes that would cause there to be many skill differences here, so those ones are very similar, but we have tried to make sure it's all sensible. You're not going to get stuff on a weapon that's irrelevant to that weapon.
Great. Will that unique Crucible helmet, the Elabin's Visage, just have a mixture of everything, or how does that work?
That one gets shield ones.
Oh, okay. So shield probably, I assume, then has a more defensive-oriented...
Yeah, I believe that it gets shield ones, but it can't give you, like, static local block and various other bits and pieces that wouldn't work very well.
Now, on unique items, once you add a Crucible tree to a unique item in the Primeval Remnant map, can you progress the tree and unlock nodes in regular Crucible content encounter, or do you have to keep doing the maps?
You can unlock nodes the regular way. So basically, doing that map, if you get the mod on it that enables you to put a Crucible tree on a unique, and I should add that's a moderately common mod, but certainly requires you to get lucky and get it, then you've kind of unlocked the ability for that unique to then have a tree that's explorable. At that point, you can then just go back to regular content in your regular endgame maps and level it up. It's only when you need to get a second copy of that unique unlocked and or do combining that you need to go back to the Primeval Remnant maps.
Now, viewers are always looking for clever ways around the system. I saw one that was if you take a item that already has a Crucible tree and chance it into a unique, does that bypass the Primeval map requirement? Or are you locked from doing that?
It does.
Oh, okay, there you go. Chance orbs going up.
Any solution here that involves more gambling from the players is happy with us.
Okay. Now we have some chat questions on these topics as well. So, Crucible interaction with mirrored and corrupted items. Can you do anything with those, or are they locked out?
Okay, so there's some fun stuff you can do in the higher tier version of the endgame map, the one that's really hard to get. And an example here, and we don't want to spoil too much, but an example, I believe, is that there is a mod which enables you to use... Is it a mod or a base property?
A mod on the map item.
Right, a mod on the map item that enables you to interact with corrupted items, for example. And so there are exceptions that you can bypass. I still believe you cannot do anything with mirrored items, right?
No, but if you mirror an item, it copies the tree.
Yeah, so mirroring an item does copy the tree, but once you've got the item mirrored, it's unmodifiable.
Okay, will you, this is a question I think for Ruthless, will you be able to imprint Crucible trees?
Yes, I don't see why not.
Alright, cool. Will Dancing Dervish benefit from the passive tree while the item is disabled? This is kind of feeds into questions like about energy blades and things like that as well, where you've got weird contextual changes in how a weapon is used and classified.
We certainly had bugs related to putting energy blades in the Crucible. That was a fun time. Yeah,
Always.
That was pretty.
Always.
Energy blades doesn't work. I'm not sure about it.
Yeah. We'll have to look into it. I mean, I'm certain the QA team have gone through everything and fixed it all, but that wasn't percolated up to me. But we'll make sure the sensible outcome applies.
Talking now about trade a bit, how will trading items with Crucible trees work? Will you be able to search for nodes on the trade site?
We are trying to get that functionality, but it's worth noting the way that this works is the trade site is put together by one of our staff members who's very busy, and he only gets the copy of the league to go and do the trade site stuff like yesterday kind of situation. So he has a week to get Crucible support working, and so we're working on it. It's difficult in this case. We normally can easily within a week sort out any itemization stuff that came from a league, and in this case it's quite complicated, as you can imagine. So we have no promises there, but yeah, of course we wanted to work on the trade site. And it's worth noting we do have an API, so if the public want to take the API and implement it better than us or faster than us, they're welcome to do so. But in the meantime, yeah, we'll try to get it up, and we want it so that people can easily identify certain nodes and trade for the items and My expectation is that it will probably be straightforward to find items with a specific node, but doing complicated searches involving combinations of nodes and other stuff will certainly not be possible initially. And so I think that the worst case scenario is players are going to be able to find a bunch of items with a node that they're looking for and then manually examine them to work out which one they actually want to trade for. And that's not a terrible compromise. In fact, it's personally how I prefer it to work, so the trade is a bit sticky.
I know. The poor developer, though, I imagine this is quite the nightmare on the web dev front, but I hope they take our energy and other building also take our energy. Now, magmatic ore was something that was kind of just subtly referenced in there. It was said to be a way of having tradable, itemized Crucible Tree experience.
So ein bisschen wie mit den Blessings irgendwie, ne? Wenn du deine Waffe da so ein bisschen buffst.
More about what these are and what they do.
Right, so it's Crucible Tree experience rather than experiences, which means you gain experience for the tree that you've got. So you consume the magmatic ore, and it levels up your item as though you'd done encounters. And so it's worth noting, this is not meant to be the efficient way to level up items, right? It's certainly not the case that people are going to bypass the encounters and just go and trade for these and they never have to actually play. This is a really inefficient way of doing it, but it is possible. If you're currency rich and time poor and need to find a way to get that last bit of experience, then this is a way to do that. It's kind of like a Facetor's Lens being a single-use item that grants the experience, and I suspect that, it's obviously going to be priced in the economy based on how useful it is, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be the primary way that you level these items up.
Right, gotcha. I feel like if there's a way of efficiently playing the game by not playing the game, someone will figure it out.
Yeah, it's dangerous for us to add, but we do like the idea of a limited amount of tradability here, and there's various ways to get it as well, which is interesting. Like there's cell nodes on the trees, as we call them, the ones that you can vend. You can vend the item to get some. There's mods on the endgame maps, and it helps a bit because when we were designing the endgame map, we didn't want the individual monsters you're fighting there to work towards leveling up a Crucible item when you're already expected to bring multiple Crucible items in with you in order to combine the trees together.
Right. Those nodes that allow you to vendor items for different rewards, it's a clever solution to the problem of why engage with the mechanic if you don't have an item that you actively want to forge right now. So how often do you find these nodes, and are they always substantial rewards, or are they some smaller ones as well, like a few Alks or a Chaos Orb?
It's worth noting, we believe that people always will have items they want to forge, and the goal of these vendor nodes is to tempt them away from that. Like at any stage, you could be working towards making the best item on the realm, but instead, there's a Divine Orb if I just sink in a bunch of encounters into getting that. And so it's a job well done of these nodes if you are sitting there getting, currency rather than actually making the most broken items. Having said that, we suspect people will work out the value of the broken items and realize those are worth going for. In terms of how often you find them, they're mostly in the end game, and they're not too common. Like, you're not going to be sitting there with a stash full of them trying to, just swim in currency. But at the same time, you'll probably have access if you need one and you don't have a thing you particularly want to focus on at the moment. It's just so encounters don't feel entirely wasted. There are also some cool little tricks and combos that we aren't going to delve into, but it's worth having a look at that. In terms of what types of currency, it's various currencies, starting at mid-tier stuff. If you do find things like Chaos Orbs, they'll be in larger quantity, and you'll have to do the math of basically how much experience am I getting versus what the currency payoff is versus what other opportunities I have for my time at the moment, and it'll be straightforward to work out which ones you're wanting to do and which ones you're wanting to trade away.
On the maps side of thing, how rare are those geodes that you can crack to get those maps, the endgame content of this?
So there's two tiers, and it's worth noting the acquisition here is subtly different than the way we normally do these maps. These are always rare, and they come through this stacked deck currency item, which is the geode that you crack open. And because it comes through the currency item, your ability to find rare items doesn't affect the rate that you find these. You're getting just currency essentially to get them. And then there's the unwrapping experience of seeing what the mods are on it. Now, the lower tier one is something you'll certainly play in maps. Often, right? It's, you're not finding it every map. Maybe you're not even finding it every 4 or 5 maps, but you are finding it pretty commonly. So you're getting a lot of access to combining trees together. The higher tier one, on the other hand, is harder to get because that lets you do some really interesting stuff. So that one is certainly pitched quite a lot rarer than the first one.
And you're being pretty coy on these maps and what they entail and what the higher version does now.
And this is for a few reasons, right? First of all the rates I'm talking about here, they're changing in this last week. This last week is the point where we massage it from being this works and is cool into a fine machine that works perfectly with the right, economic implications and so on. We're starting the alpha shortly. in 10 minutes kind of thing. And that's going to give us really good feedback there. We've got a week of iteration now that everything is working and great, and so things will change. There will be more mods added, there'll be mods removed. And so if I go into too much detail of listing every mod, it's just going to be wrong a week from now when we've had time to really hone it.
Fair enough. Let's talk a bit about the challenge of this league. So the longer you channel the Crucible Forge in a map encounter, the more dangerous it becomes. What makes the monsters dangerous here?
So as you channel it, more monsters are spawned, and they combine into larger, more impactful monsters. So higher tier monsters here, we've got an internal tiering system. The higher tier monsters are generally more likely to be magic, rare, or unique. And the longer you channel, the more damage and damage reduction every monster gets. Also, more difficult encounters are more rewarding. So generally speaking, play the hardest encounters you can. But it's worth noting, and this is an interesting question, everyone comes up with, is there a button I can click to bypass the channeling and just have the hardest difficulty encounter, right? Fair enough, no one likes having to wait a few seconds, but it's worth noting the hardest difficulty encounter will probably smear you to the wall. We want, and this may be wishful thinking because some Path of Exile players are very capable, but we're trying very hard to make it so that the highest difficulty encounters are significantly harder than League content that you may have accidentally run into in the past. Now, of course, you don't need to max it out like that. Maybe only do that if you have ridiculous twink items or something. We are also trying to signal this in the UI. This wasn't shown in the video, but we are having kind of like a temperature concept where the harder it's getting, the more you see the UI getting a bit angry at you. And so I can generally handle about this amount of difficulty, and you've got an idea of where your character falls on the scale. You're certainly going to want to go as hard as you can, but our goal here when designing these risk versus reward leagues is to kill your character. We want to set it up so you overcommit and get nothing, because that way you'll learn your abilities and it's a little less gifty than if we just had every encounter succeedable.
It's like Metamorph all over again with players putting sticks in their own front tires and being like, oh no, why have I crashed? Oh. Cool.
Yes.
On that note then, what happens if you fail a Crucible encounter? Is there some risk-reward aspect here, just outside of dying?
You only get the Crucible tree experience if you complete the encounter, but your item is not at risk. We were moderately safe with that. So essentially, if you make an encounter that's too hard, you might lose experience on your main character or lose your hardcore character or something if you die, but realistically, the only thing you're practically missing out on is finishing the encounter to get the experience.
I noticed on the Primeval Remnant map teaser, there was a mod, players cannot suppress spell damage. I know the intention is to make these maps very challenging, but how do you approach making monsters harder versus disabling aspects of builds or hampering the player when it comes to designing difficulty?
So the mods on the maps are meant to be very dangerous. Like, we picked mods here that are like Expedition Remnants almost. Like, we want something that's very challenging. But you get fewer of them than on a regular map because half of them are upsides. So 6 modded map here has 3 upsides, 3 downsides. And the downside ones, some of them will raise the difficulty of the monsters, usually by a bunch, and some of them will hamper your build's defenses or potentially make your build not work in the map. But it's worth noting that stuff like spell suppression is more of a hampering your defenses than saying you can't kill monsters. So certainly going into a no spell suppression map when you rely on it takes away one of your defensive attributes, like be careful about that, but it's not necessarily completely breaking it for you. You're going to have to make decisions about which to play. And we strongly prefer that way of designing it. If we have to make it so that every map is playable in every character without really imposing any difficulty, then it just becomes a bit of mush. And so, in this case, you will occasionally open a geode, look forward to doing the map, and realize it's better for your friend to do it, and maybe you'll trade with one that you can do. And if you're playing in SSF and don't have the ability to trade, then you just have to make decisions about whether you run it or don't run it as the other option, or run it carefully, or make another character in that map to get value from it. And so on.
Du kriegst hier nichts.
Alright. I always have to ask, party play, how does it work in Crucible?
So it fully works in a party, everyone gets experience.
Ooh.
Basically, you must channel an item at the encounter at least a little bit to be rewarded for it. So there's the molten circle, as you've seen, and basically the players step inside and you choose an item and channel it. And all the channeling makes the encounter harder and more rewarding and so on. And as long as you've contributed at least a second of channeling or whatever, you're going to be taking part in it. Once anyone who is channeled steps outside of the molten ring, a countdown starts which will trigger the encounter. And it's worth noting that throughout maps, that means you can fully engage with these without any problem or loss. Like, sure, maybe, some annoying party member will make the encounter way too hard for everyone, but they have the ability to do that elsewhere in the game too. In endgame maps, each map only allows the map owner to use its crafting benches. So 1 geode equals 1 map equals 1 craft. You can bring your friends, they can get stuff from it, but they can't use that craft unless they contributed the map.
Some more questions from chat. How does item level and map tier affect Crucible? Can I quarry farm item level 86 weapons, they ask?
All right.
Low-level areas have way less Crucible experience.
So low-level areas give quite a lot less Crucible experience. There's an exponential curve on that to encourage you. Like, you know, if you're playing somewhere 10 levels under you, you're certainly going to have a much better time just doing it in the maps that you're playing. Any other aspects that are worth mentioning?
Item level affects how much experience it requires to level up.
That's true. So the item level does affect experience costs for hitting certain skills. And of course, I believe that certain skills are gated behind certain levels as well, right? You really do want to be playing higher level stuff. Like, maybe there's some niche place where you can get access to a certain skill and it isn't too expensive to get it and you can quarry farm more efficiently, but you're kind of wasting your time doing that compared to just playing the maps that... In an old version of Path of Exile, where map scarcity was more of a thing, like in, say, Ruthless, where it's actually hard to play maps because it economically destroys you to play too many, then fair enough, quarry farming might be a more reasonable strategy. But I think that in contemporary mainline Path of Exile, you're wasting your time if you're spending too long in the quarry here.
Now, the mobs that you spawn with the channeling of the Crucible, are these different to normal mobs, or are they enhanced versions of regular mobs? And either way, are they something that you can turn into a Spectre, for example? Summoner players would like to know.
So a few questions there. So they are actually themed around the properties of the item, which is interesting. Like, there's a light relation between what you've got on the item you're channeling. There's some subtlety here, but they are special. And in general, for these leagues, we try to draw monsters from the pool that are in the area, or at least, you know, the models of those monsters, just for memory reasons and so on. Is there anything else that's special about these monsters here, aside from the fact that they're quite a lot harder if you make the encounter hard?
Yeah, they have new skills, and they are spectrable.
Yeah, so all spectrable, all have new skills. There is essentially a separate set of Crucible monsters.
None of that is what I expected.
I actually personally underestimated how important new monsters are for league design. Like, we've done a lot of these leagues, like 38 or 39, and if you sat me in a room alone without any other devs and got me to list what goes into a league, I'd forget new monsters. But a lot of people here realize it's critical to have it so the texture of the moment-to-moment combat with monsters does feel different than the rest of the game in a league, and so that's been quite interesting. As something that it honestly took me a lot of years of development of Path of Exile before I realized how important that was.
You said the modifiers on the item affect what monsters spawn. That's such a, like, clever
The tree modifiers, like the tree that you're leveling up. You'll see what we mean. It's not a big deal. It's just cute.
I mean, that's what I mean. Like, that's really cute. Like, it's a cute detail, a nuance that I wouldn't have expected. Neat.
I know we're rushed to make these expansions in the cycle time we have, but we do get time to finesse the details. And interestingly, this cycle has been 17 weeks, so we've had a few extra weeks to get it right. And yeah, I mean, you know, I don't mean to prematurely curse anything, but we're actually looking at a pretty good place quality-wise. Like, the number of issues we have open in our tracker and the stress on the team is significantly lower than it has been at various points. Like, I think yesterday, when we're at the point where we would in the past have had 250 open issues, we're at like 87 by my count. And so, you know, I'm not seeing overtime being done outside of a little bit of preparation for the live stream the last few evenings. And so that's looking pretty good. I think that, like the Incursion launch, we're going to be hitting it with like a bit of time to spare and make sure everything's good.
That's excellent to hear. And details like that, nuances like that as well. I think they really add to the like flavor of it. You know, this weapon that you've been working on for a while is going to feel different to craft than a different weapon in a subtle way that you might not even put your finger on. And that's quite cool. So let's move on to a league revamps topic now. So the Breach revamp, I feel, is actually a really clever way of dealing with the issue of like old content bloat, or of the game being too overwhelming for new players. Revamp older content, shift it up to a higher level where it's discovered later and less likely to overwhelm those newer players. Now, was this the intention here, or just a happy side effect?
It's a happy side effect, but one that we definitely acknowledge. So the basic way that the Breach revamp happened was we started by saying, man, there are a lot of splinters in Breach, and it feels crap to click on every splinter, and they kind of are worthless because you're working towards a Breach Stone when you pick up a bunch of them, and that Breach Stone is going to be lower level than you are right now. Like, you're not going to care about that Breach Stone. You're going to want to upgrade it multiple times before you can run it. So how do we fix this? We thought, wouldn't it be cool if splinters were rarer, so they're impactful and there's less clicks, and they actually led to something immediately good? And so we realized, oh look, let's take Breach Stones and just like bump them up a bunch of levels and basically make Breach Stones themselves valuable, because in their current form it's like based around an old version of Path of Exile. And then we realized we can just remove 3 tiers of Breach Stones in this case, and we just cascaded the chain of tidy-ups from there until eventually Breach is pitched at way more impactful, you know, tighter than before, higher power level, more valuable splinters, and that's where we ended up.
Will you still have to do things like click breach hands in the thick of combat and like pick up those kind of scattered drops afterwards?
Yes, you do. And we think that clicking chests during the hectic combat with the chests vanish at the end is actually part of the fun of Breach. Like, here is a glimpse into another world where monsters are rushing in from all directions. What can you get? Can you kill them in time? Can you get the chests? Blah, blah, blah. It's part of the challenge of the short flash encounter here is to get as many items you can through whatever means. And so we didn't want to make it so it automatically gives you your entitlement of chest items at the end. Now, picking up scattered items is annoying. I get that, right? There's no, this is not an intentional thing that we're trying to make the player have to run around afterwards and look to see if stuff drops. But we didn't find any good solutions that solved all cases, right? Like, during this process, there wasn't an easy way of sorting that out that fit in with the other changes we're making. But we're going to keep an eye out on feedback. It's certainly something we're open to changing in the future if we find a good solution.
The Abyss revamp looks great. I don't really have any specific questions about that one. Maybe chat will. But can we hope to see similar quality passes on more dated things in the future? Like, for example, Harbinger, maybe?
Yeah, it's very likely. No promises, though, on when. Like, for 3.22, we haven't scoped out what in-game improvements are looking like yet, so it could well include Harbinger, or definitely not, and we don't know yet.
And back to that kind of initial question, which was the idea of like content bloat or things being a bit overwhelming for new players. Is this something that you guys recognize as a major issue, especially in the lead up to Path of Exile 2 with a bunch of new players on the way potentially?
We're always aware of the fact that Path of Exile is a complicated game with a lot of stuff going on, and your point about raising the level of Breach to take it away from, your introduction to maps is very valid. It becomes a thing where Path of Exile pretty well by the point that it's introduced, and it's difficult towing the line between how to describe this. It's difficult towing the line between lots of content being available and content being introduced at a slow pace. One of our competitive advantages versus other action RPGs is the fact we have a vast library of old content that's fleshed out. But on the other hand, that can be a problem because for new players, when they have to understand 20 complicated systems or 50 complicated systems, it's sometimes easier to play other games that require less learning. So we're trying to make sure that many of these do actually feel pretty optional and you get them, it's no problem for them to learn how Breach works several weeks into playing potentially.
A bunch of people are also asking if there's any news on Ultimatum.
We have mentioned in the past that we have a plan for Ultimatum. That plan is definitely still happening, but not part of 3.21.
Fair enough. I'll just check every time until.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be announced at ExileCon.
Maybe.
Okay. Is Ritual being looked at for improvement? It got hit pretty bad due to the removal of +1 monster level watchstones. This is a question from chat.
It hasn't been discussed yet, but as I mentioned, we haven't worked out the next set of in-game improvements, so fair enough. It'll be on the list to look at.
Is there any plans to change Blight Atlas Tree notables? Half of them are there to guarantee Blight events when there's already Sextants and Scarabs.
We actually did a pretty deep look at Blight on the Atlas Tree a few months ago, and there were some inconsistencies we wanted to tidy up. Again, I can't promise that's in scope for 3.22, but yeah, it certainly is something that we probably need to evaluate.
All right. Talking a bit about now masteries and ascendancies, as there's some pretty big announcements there. One in particular that really impressed me was the life mastery that gives 15% life if your body armor has no life on it. That kind of feels like a game changer in some ways. Body armor has always had really fierce competition, and whether something has life or not is a big part of the evaluation there. So I really like this design overall, but we do have some unique items that have 5 to 10% increased life, and I imagine that might feel like a bit of a bummer if you want to use one of those.
Well, in that case, you save yourself a passive point and you get to, go pick a different mastery and there are some powerful ones to pick instead. We're not intending to go and remove life off those because of the presence of the mastery. That would feel pretty mandatory.
Restore hat übrigens kein Leben drauf, ne?
Yes.
Find that no life. Now this consolation style design that makes up for a shortfall feels like kind of new ground here, and it might have some potential use cases in other areas. Like for example, the idea of movement speed if your boots don't have movement speed. Is this something you'd consider expanding out in other areas?
It's currently just on the life mastery. I mean, we've got other interesting new designs on the other masteries, of course, and it is a possibility for later, but we want to be careful with this one because, in the boots case, for example, I worry that soon you'd pick, the masteries that make your gear good, and then it doesn't really matter what your items are, as long as you, for the love of God, don't roll that movement speed or life. And that's kind of against most of how people are trained to create items in Path of Exile. So we're experimenting with body armors, with life, but other things follow normal rules for a while.
Yeah, it is. It does seem kind of like an experimental thing because you're right. Like it could go the other way to what you want, where it's like warping perceptions of items in unpleasant ways potentially. So interesting. I'll be keen to see how this one goes then. A lot of the other masteries look really impactful as well. I was pretty surprised to see instant leech after that being such an issue in the past, for example. A lot of people have been hoping for like a meta shakeup in terms of changing skills specifically, but here we're getting like a bunch of new Val skills obviously have an impact, and then like all of these masteries and passive changes and stuff like that. Now, what factors kind of go into deciding whether you want to rebalance a skill or the other things like gear and passives around a build, rather?
So regarding the meta shakeup, we could at any point go and pick a bunch of skills and alter their damage values and so on, and we've done that in the past, and it hasn't really been as impactful as we wanted. Often what will happen if we buff things that are underused is people don't immediately notice, and then a while later someone stumbles across it, and that doesn't immediately cause the feeling of a new meta that people wanted. It feels like the same meta even though there's stuff they haven't found. And so we wanted to try in this case, leaving the skills alone for the most part. I mean, there's skill balance. You'll read it in the patch notes in a little while. But for the most part, a lot of the changes come from the fact that broadly, many of the masteries have been changed. 2 specific ascendancies have been changed. You've got a lot of new Val skills for many, many different builds. And the masteries in particular have a big impact here because they're right in your face when you're doing your tree planning. You certainly see all of these interesting new ways of building. Like an example is, let's look at stun for a second, right? Previously, everything to do with stun in the game was about how do I make it happen less and how do I have it affect my character less, right? Shorter stuns less frequently. There's stun stuff now, which encourages you to get stunned if you want to build that way. There's a passive that gives you adrenaline for like 2 seconds per 100 milliseconds of stun, I think. Is that right? Yeah. So if you can find a way of having 350 milliseconds of stun inflicted on you every 7 seconds, then you've got adrenaline permanently. And sure, that may not even be a good build, but it's a build you could do. And so we're trying with these masteries to cause people to completely rethink how they interact with these mechanics. To answer your question, though, about how what factors decide whether we rebalance a skill or other things, we haven't done a Passover mastery since they were first released, and so they weren't what we would call like modernized. And so before we go and just tweak numbers on a skill, we want to make sure that the supporting systems have been modernized. Like the breach thing, for example, which isn't a meta change, that had been a while before it had been modernized, and so it's sitting there just kind of out of whack with the rest of the game. It's not worth running until now. And so we wanted to make sure the masteries were really good scaffolding for builds before we went to tweak individual numbers.
Very cool. I wanted to deep dive a little bit into the design theory behind Saboteur. So I was pretty initially skeptical of the idea of like adding nodes that aren't about traps or mines, the core identity there, but those trigger bots look pretty awesome. Kind of changed my mind a little bit. They're quite unique. How do you go about making sure that the rest of an ascendancy feels up to the task and has some choices for players to make? So for example, you've got like Perfect Crime, the bots, and Like Clockwork, the cooldowns. Both are really great. And then you've got some other more contextual nodes in Explosives at Work, Expert and Bomb Specialist. Those are like limited to crit or cold AoE builds, for example. But they're still potentially usable. But then everything else is traps and mines, that core identity. There's like such a big divide between the two play styles there that there's not really an overlap in the nodes. So you potentially run into an issue where when you do something like this, you have no real choices to make because all of them are, you've only got the choices that make sense for the build and the others are completely irrelevant. So that feels like a potentially a little bit one-dimensional for Path of Exile. So kind of how do you get to this point?
There's been a lot of iteration of a Saboteur, including recently. Like, we had a version in the live stream that we're ready to prepare, we're confident in, and we're good to go. And there was enough internal kind of, it might be perceived as a nerf going on, that we went and changed it further, made sure that it was, we were much more comfortable with it, added more... did we add entire nodes to it? Or we literally added a node to it to make sure that there was more choice and that it worked better. Refilmed the sections of the live stream, got me back in the recording studio to do the voiceover of that, and updated the live stream at the last minute because we want to make sure that the different builds work. And the Saboteur is a little bit of a different experience than before because it now has these other options. But it also, and most importantly, is not the only way to play traps and mines. Our goal here is that if the word trap or mine comes up in your build guide, it doesn't 100% have an association with Saboteur. There are trap and mine builds with other ascendancies now, like with Necromancer, how if you want to use minions, it's possible to come up with minion builds that are on a different ascendancy. And so the Saboteur is the obvious place to go for easy access to trap and mine power, as well as like trigger stuff, right? That's the first point of call, but it certainly isn't the final point of call for people who want to do some really wacky stuff.
Yeah, and that kind of like raises a good counterpoint, which is like, while there might not be a bunch of different choices for trigger builds in Saboteur besides the ones laid out, you have all of the other classes to decide. So picking Saboteur in the first place is that choice.
Yes.
And you know, fun new playstyles added.
The trigger bots are pretty OP.
They look awesome. So cool. Does the new passive reworks to the two new classes affect Ascendant at all?
Did we change the Ascendant?
Yes, we did.
Yep. That's cool. I didn't know that. Good work. Yes, we have.
Good job, background devs.
I want to look at that now.
Do you folks plan on changing passives around the tree or just the masteries that are changing?
Yeah, there are passives that have changed around the tree, right? Yeah, there's new clusters, and I mean, the patch notes, which will be posted as soon as we stop talking, have all the details, but it was mentioned in the live stream too, just in passing. You know, like how I mentioned early game balance changes, and then everyone comes to me and says, why are you not talking about the early game balance changes on the live stream?
Yeah, there was life recovery clusters, there was a few new clusters scattered around to increase access to masteries, and there was +1 projectiles.
Yep.
So that was pretty spicy. Okay, here's a question about Sab. If Sabo trigger bots trigger your spells on them, how do those trigger bots cost mana to trigger? Like, do those spells cost mana?
Like regular triggering, right? Yeah, it's just like regular triggering. The difference is there are two trigger bots, they run at the enemies like you'd expect, it triggers from both of them, and instead of just purely doubling your damage and moving it onto the enemies, there is this minor damage penalty so that it's not quite, you know, literally double damage, but still obviously is a big boost.
All right. Let's talk about a couple other random questions. You mentioned a fair amount of early game changes that changed the racing meta, though this is the sort of thing that affects everyone. So what sort of early game changes can we expect? And by the way, Bex, let's flip something involving support gems. Sorry.
Yeah. So we actually have another whole skill gem and 3 support gems that we didn't even talk about in the live stream. It's 1 main skill and 3 supports, right, guys? Snipe, Mana Forged Arrows, Prismatic Burst, Momentum, I think? Yeah. So it's interesting how this happens, really, but we ummed and ahed about what to do about the ExileCon races for so long, right? Because we didn't want to just say, oh, look, it's the same Katava kill as last time, go. Because then we get exactly the same race with exactly the same racers, and it's just a repeat of the 2019 event. But at the same time, when we looked at other wacky races we could do, they didn't feel like Path of Exile. Like, Path of Exile racing is a celebration of how quickly can you play through the game without wacky mods involved? And so people, when we asked them what they liked about watching the races at ExileCon, was the fact that the races are doing everything that the normal players are doing just so well. Like, they're just so optimized with their stuff. So we wanted to make sure they were playing true Path of Exile. The problem is true Path of Exile is more or less pretty similar to what it was in 2019. So we said, well, what if the racing strategy is different? What if we just went and improved the early game in a way that doesn't have significant impact on the actual meta of the late game, and just did a whole bunch of tidy up in ways that really affect races? And that way the races can play 321, which is released in a week. We'll do all the qualifiers during 321, and that's also the version of Path of Exile that's live at ExileCon, because 322 is coming out a couple of weeks after ExileCon. So it perfectly fits a consistent set of balance that we can keep the same for fairness. And so many changes were made, and this involved some pretty radical stuff. Controversially, and this is explained better in the patch notes, we've removed the Onslaught support gem from early game situations. Honestly, the patch notes do a much better job than I do of explaining it, but in return, other gems have been introduced which achieve similar goals to it. And so I'd recommend reading the patch notes for the full detail, but there are several new gems which do affect in-game builds and that they're now options you have available. The favorite one that I was reading about recently was this cool like semi-active, semi-support gem, which is called Snipe, which our internal description that has probably been improved since this was written was channel to charge up your bow, gaining stages, release to trigger 1 linked bow skill for each stage gained, and a few other caveats.
Whoa.
And so basically you can channel and then release a bunch of bow skills at the same time. So cool stuff like that has come out of this. And yeah, it's, balance changes. There's going to be some nerfs in there. There's going to be some buffs, but they do not have a large impact on endgame Path of Exile. So when reading the patch notes, take it with a bit of a grain of salt at the fact that it's aimed at the early game.
This is interesting because, in the past, the idea was talked about of having some skills that were the low level ones, and then potentially would transition them out of it. But it's not something that's really true to Path of Exile very often. Most of the time, most things that you can use in early game are end game viable as well. So this is kind of more a design of having some things that potentially are very early game and not really necessarily intended for late game.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll explore skills more in that realm in the future as well? And is that something that Path of Exile 2 will feature more?
Well, Path of Exile 2 gives us an opportunity to somewhat tidy up what skills there are, and we're moving things around between levels and basically having a chance to, because it's a game that obviously involves many changes, having a chance to actually review stuff. So that helps with us working out what are the early and high versions of things. Obviously, we can make those changes in current Path of Exile 1. It's just that it comes at a cost where we take something and break it for high levels or take it away from early levels and suddenly build, say, hey, I was using that. And, there's certainly a live cost to that.
Now, I see a few things come up in chat repeatedly, so I'll touch on those. Some other Ascendancy players... What was that?
I was asking, they want us to log in?
That's certainly that.
Okay.
There's a few other Ascendancy players who want reassurance that their Ascendancy will be addressed. I see Gladiator mentioned a lot.
Yeah, we could list the 17 Ascendancies. We don't yet know which ones are coming. Shall I tell a story? Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. Sorry, everyone who's on patch notes. We're getting story time instead. We wanted to nerf all the Ascendancies in Ruthless for power reasons. And so we looked into what that would involve. Pretty quick numeric nerfs. And while doing so, we came up with a whole bunch of new interesting stats. And we said, okay, well, we cannot release these stats in just Ruthless, right? Because that would be crazy. The community who already have low patience for any Ruthless stuff that we do would certainly find it unfair that we gave Ruthless a bunch of new interesting tools alongside a pile of nerfs. So we said, why don't we change all the Ascendancies in the core game to use these new stats as well? Not nerfing them, just making them like we've done with the Pathfinder and the Saboteur here. And so we started on that. And the plan was to do about half the Ascendancies in 3.21, and then also do all the Ruthless ones at the same time, figuring that's fair because there's enough stuff given to the base game. Unfortunately, we didn't get it to a state where it would actually be releasable. Many of those Ascendancies were going well, but they weren't quite finished. The internal feedback was to the point where it felt a little bit like a nerf in some cases, or it felt too much like a buff, or we weren't quite there, and we obviously can't release it unless we've had time. So then we had a situation where we're really happy with the Pathfinder and Saboteur. They're going great, and all the Ruthless ones are sitting there with new stats on them. And so we intentionally undid all the Ruthless changes there to stop there being an outcry, and so that we get more time to sit on it and work out what we're doing in the base game. And so the intention is that we do have stockpiled a large number of Ascendancy changes from when we get time to do it properly, which hopefully will include many in 3.22. And we just have to work out politically what we do with said Ruthless changes, because I would love to release them. I mean, they're not quite ready. I'm not saying we want permission to put them in 3.21, but we're at some stage likely to debut that set of stuff because we do feel the power level of Ascendancies and Ruthless is too high relative to items. And so, long story short, in answer to the question of when do the other Ascendancy classes get some love, the love is half done. And so, yeah, it's coming.
The political intricacies at play here.
Yeah, it's just, the problem is, while this expansion ended up with a lot of balance changes, and we're not worried about that, there was a time period when we hadn't piled in so many balance changes where it looked like half the work went towards Ruthless. And that's not a good look, because it's done for the purpose of the core game. It's just if you release it in Ruthless first, you just upset everyone for no reason. And so there's a bit of politics with that, but at the same time, we definitely want to make sure that all the players feel equally valued.
Since you brought it up, let's chat Ruthless a little bit briefly. Will it have its own unique cosmetic rewards now that it's getting challenges? And if so, how many?
It has the same cosmetic rewards as the base game. This is another case here of trying to go for fairness. You can either earn the cool armor set by playing regular Path of Exile or by playing Ruthless. I don't know which is easier. There are fewer challenges in Ruthless, but it's quite hard to do those in Ruthless. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's difficult to say. I recommend working out what your capabilities are and doing it in that mode. And there is a different totem flag. So if you do complete the challenges in Ruthless and in the base game, you technically get 2 hideout totems to show that you did.
And a bunch of people have had a chance to play Ruthless and try it out. There's been some discussion of the difficulty and whether it's a fun type of difficulty or rather where it's just slower. How do you feel about the initial version of how it's played out and the types of challenge that it offers?
We really like it internally. It emphasizes how fun items can be to find when you're desperately craving upgrades. Like, I get that it's not for everyone, they don't have to play it, but it's an experience of overcoming scarcity and feeling every upgrade to your character that we think is a really valuable thing. And what's interesting is some people, when playing it, say, to be honest, regular Path of Exile, like baseline Path of Exile that a new player installs, could actually be Ruthless, and they might have a better time than the overcrowded, very complicated mainline version that we currently have. Now, we don't plan to make that change where we swap them around, just in terms of what new player experience people get, but it is true that if you're sitting someone down for the first time, they get a bit more of a meaningful and less complicated experience playing in that mode. Having said that, it's still an experiment, it's still a passion project that we're tinkering away with, but it also educates us a lot on the appropriate balance for item mods and how, like the fact that Eternal Orbs could come back, for example, is a realization we made that was actually pretty cool, and looking at the consequences of the different types of crafting and how they interact has been very instrumental for us. And this is all important because we have to get this stuff right with the upcoming Path of Exile 2 balance, right? We have to make sure that Path of Exile 2 is balanced as a great game from the start.
It's almost like it's a useful dev tool more than anything in that regard.
Yeah, and there's a growing community of people enjoying it, which is why we've got the boss kill race happening in Ruthless. I know that'll be controversial to some players who don't particularly want to play it, but they weren't going to win that race anyway, right? Like, the people who are going to win that race know why we're putting it in Ruthless.
Oh, no. Damn.
We also don't know if it even is winnable. Like, to emphasize here, Ruthless, Solo Self-Found, Hardcore, both pinnacle bosses. Right? That's hard.
Yeah.
There's a ticking clock before those ExileCon tickets aren't valid anymore, right? The event.
It would take me that entire time to get there, that's for sure. For my own experience, a lot of the early game feelings I had echoed what you were talking about with, like, the changes were very effective in making you really feel gear upgrades and think about how you play your character, and those sorts of challenge changes were really effective. For me though, where it fell apart was actually at that end game, where the scarcity, the economy, and the map drops were so slow that even when I felt ready, I couldn't really progress in end game at what I felt like it was a reasonable pace. Even dedicating the entirety of my currency supply towards maps. I was still kind of blanking and dropping back down to low white tier maps. And I've seen plenty of people break through this wall, so it's certainly possible, but it is slow and it bears mentioning, I think. How do you feel about the end game progression there?
So we've made some adjustments to this in 3.21, but we don't want to overshoot the mark. We don't want to just dramatically swing something in a way that makes maps sustain too easy. It is intentional that maintaining the highest maps requires significant economic sacrifice in Ruthless, which, as you say, some people can break through, but it's essentially the case that you almost have to just pay, a very high price to be playing red maps repeatedly, and that's in the right direction for Ruthless, and we do want it to be a little more accessible than it currently is, so I'm hoping the changes on 3.21 do help a bit there, but we'll keep nudging it. We just don't want to accidentally get it to the point where everyone's got expectations of sitting in red maps like they do in the base game.
All right, so potentially some smaller changes there, fine-tuning things out. The Atlas tree is different in Ruthless. Joe wants to know if we'll be getting gateways there as well.
Yep.
Cool. Very nice. We have a random eclectic mix of chat questions now, so I'm just going to jump straight into these. I have not seen what they are yet, so let's have a go. Lucky Dip. Do we need to equip the weapon to level it in Crucible, or can we use any weapon in our inventory?
It has to be equipped, but it can be on your weapon swap. The intention here is that you can't be playing, say, a bow character and have some really high-level wand that you're necessarily working on without sacrifice. You are making things for you. And this is also so that you're guaranteed to be carrying the item around with you. You're not having to sacrifice inventory space for it. There's a bunch of things that went into that decision, but essentially, yeah, stick the item on your weapon swap if it's not the primary one you're currently using.
Does that work if the item's disabled? Because you can do some stuff where you put an Astramentus on and then equip the item and then take the Astramentus off and it goes red, but it's still equipped.
We'll find out.
Okay. Now chat's just doing the classic Q&A thing where they're spamming melee ? Like there's a question there. You do know that questions involve a few more words than that usually, but, maybe that's enough for you to work off. Melee?
So in the last expansion, we intentionally introduced a large number of Val skills and some other melee changes. And so the intention with the melee Val skills was to raise the power level of all of those skills because periodically you get to play them in God mode for a few seconds. And we haven't made as many melee changes in this particular release here, and that's partly because there are, the other 90% of players also would like balance changes. So we definitely have it on the radar to keep an eye on, but there's nothing else in 3.21 apart from what you'll see in the patch notes rather soon.
Yep, so VAR skills and masteries and a couple fine tunes here, so have a read in a second when I stop talking. What happens if you animate a weapon with a Crucible tree? Oh.
It works.
It works.
Oh, the
Do you
new
expect
level.
less from Path of Exile?
No, I expected it to work, actually. Yeah, I'm impressed, because I imagine there's some complicated things there, but...
I shouldn't have done a dev check there. I should have, eye contact with the camera. It works. And then quickly, they scurry to make it work.
Even things that, allocate passives, does that work? Because they don't have a passive tree, right? Surely those don't work.
There's... The ones that make sense for it to work will work, but I don't think... like Master Fletcher, for example, right?
Oh. It should work.
It should work. At the end of the day, right? Animated guardians and animated weapons are just, entities that get stats, right? If you give an animated weapon +1 arrows or something, it's going to fire +1 arrows, like a monster would, like the player would.
Yeah, but you're giving it a passive that then gives the +1 arrows. That implies they have a passive tree. Does that imply they have a soul?
Oh, it's technically that we're not giving it the passive. We're giving it the stat and we're calling it the passive. But we're getting into, internals here. Maybe we are giving... Anyway, we're fine. It'll work.
Do animate guardians have souls?
That raises ethical questions.
Oh god, okay. Does things like pack size affect Crucible? I assume map modifiers will in general, right?
So here's an interesting one. The items that are shown in the live stream do include pack size on those the rare maps there, and that doesn't affect the
So in the in-game area, pack size doesn't exist. In regular maps, pack size does influence the value of the monsters being spawned.
Right, okay. Yep, so the bit I was getting at was more of a side point, which is that pack size doesn't exist on the endgame maps that, the Crucible-specific ones. The pictures on the live stream do show it. That's because we hadn't removed it at that stage, and this is because it had no way of really juicing up the size of the encounters you're finding there, so we went with quantum rarity instead. With regard to the base game, if you get pack size on your maps, it will increase the value of the Crucible monsters in their encounters, so it is beneficial to have it.
Once upon a time, did you entertain the idea of permanent skin transfers, destroying an item to create a permanent NTX? Is there any word on this, or has it been abandoned as unfeasible?
It's hard, and we haven't done it yet, but it's certainly something that we don't have philosophical problems with.
Okay. Alright, chat, you been spamming anything else?
I'm going to go log in soon.
Yeah, log in? Is that the spam?
Play some Crucible.
Still typing melee. Any changes planned for Expedition gear? What's next with Ward?
I'm unaware of any changes planned for Expedition gear at the moment. I mean, at this stage, it's pretty much a matter of they can read the patch notes in a couple of minutes, and that will answer, and, Control F Ward, right? And otherwise, keep posting feedback about what stuff you'd like to see changes to, and we'll look into it for the upcoming expansions.
Perfect. Well, let's make that 1 minute. People want to know if fishing rods will have Crucible trees, Chris?
I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to let them work it out, right?
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much for your time, Chris. Thanks
You're welcome. It's been great.
As always.
Thanks so much.
All right. See you fun folks later. Bye-bye.
Na, bist du eingeschlafen? Bei so viel englische Bubble.
Du musst gleich die Patch Notes dann mal drin schieben. Dann
Ja,
lesen wir
schiebe ich
zusammen
ja auch
mit dir.
hin, wenn sie mal da sind. Sind sie jetzt schon da?
Ich hab F5 gedrückt, bei mir steht da 502 Bad Gateway.
Like auch.
PoE-Seite dauert.
Ich glaub, wurde DDoSt.
I love it.
Oh, aber...
Im Twitch-Chat auch 502 Bad Gateway, KW, Classic.
Ja. Aber im Dings ist noch nichts. Der hat gerade wieder funktioniert bei mir. Oh, jetzt ist der Forum-Index kaputt wieder. Verstehe ich gar nicht. Konnte das passieren? Also hört sich ja alles echt interessant an. Da hätte man gleich Lust irgendwie anzufangen zu spielen.
Ja, auf jeden Fall. Ja, spannend wird halt, was so für Sachen halt da Frucht sein können. Aber wie gesagt, das ist so ähnlich wie mit den Blessings halt einfach, ne?
Ja.
Und ich sag mal so, das ist so ein bisschen wie mit, du hast ja mal gesagt, ja, wäre ja cool, wenn man noch so zusätzliche passive Punkte irgendwie kriegen könnte oder
genau das, ja.
Und genau das ist das da letztendlich. Du hast halt, und vor allem du hast halt verschiedene, ne? Du kannst zwar dann nicht selber erstmal grundsätzlich entscheiden, weil das ist natürlich ein bisschen Glück dann auch, was du auf dem Item drauf hast, aber wenn du ein Item hast, dann kannst du das erstmal nehmen.
Ja. Ja, wenn du auch dann so eine Sachen zum Beispiel drauf hast, ich sag mal, das ist ja auch interessant, ne? Für die Offense zum Beispiel, wenn da so ein Teil drauf ist mit, du kannst das verkaufen für ein Divine oder sowas.
Absolut, ja.
Ne? Macht das dann natürlich auch interessant, also...
Ja, und dann packst du in deinen passiven, also in deiner Offhand halt sozusagen, also nicht hier Second Slot halt drin.
Ja, genau.
Machst du das halt schön voll, ja. Nee, das ist schon cool.
Und so ist das ja sicherlich auch gedacht, oh, jetzt hier, Content Update 3.2.1, Cups.
Oh, dann schieb mal drin, wenn du was hast.
Ja, hab's drin geschoben.
Oh, okay. Oh.
So, wollen wir auch von oben anfangen?
Ja, na, scroll mal unter die Links da, genau. Gut, also ich glaube, Crucible brauchen wir uns erstmal nicht durchlesen, das haben wir jetzt gesehen, was da passiert.
Genau, New Content, das mit den Wahlgames, das haben wir glaube ich auch.
Genau, aber lass mal kurz New Content and Features.
Hier bin ich mal gespannt hier mit dem Reunivation Totem.
Ja, muss man mal gucken, was das dann ist, ne? Also ich fand das doch mit dem Lightning Arrow fand ich jetzt auch nicht so schlecht. Firestorm wird noch spannend, was das kann. Ah, hier, guck mal, Edit. Ah, guck mal, hier, da sind neue Gems. Snipe.
Genau, Snipe, Channel. Mana Forged Arrows. New Intelligence, Prismatic Burst.
Oh, hier. The following currencies now have a stack size of 20.
Alchemy, Wahl, Chaos.
Items now persist in the vendor's shop for multiple levels. Okay.
Ja.
Okay. Gut, ich glaube, eine Breach und Dings können wir auch erstmal überspringen.
Many Breached Unique Items, irgendwas. Das hier noch, ne?
Ja. Ja, das muss man uns mal separat durchlesen.
Abyss kommt dann, dann können wir glaube ich auch erstmal überspringen.
Kannst du auch überspringen,
Atlas
genau.
Changes.
Bitte?
Atlas Changes.
Ja, genau, lass mal da. Oh, have been added. Was ist removed? Ashen Wood ist raus. Burial Chambers ist raus.
Borg. Estuary ist auch raus.
Tower ist wieder drin. Das ist
aber Graves Through ist raus. Graves Through ist raus, das ist gut. Lava Lake ist raus. Da.
Als wichtigstes ist, dass Tower wieder da ist.
Tower ist wieder drin. Dann Tropical Island ist drin. Race Course, das hast du ja nicht gerne gemacht. Ich hab die ja mal jetzt gerne gespielt. Jungle Valley ist auch wieder drin.
Ja.
Belfry.
Ja, das ist eigentlich ganz gut.
Beach ist aber wieder drin, ne? So, Map Tiers. Gut, okay, das haben sie natürlich wieder durchgewürfelt, ne?
Ja. Pantheon ist auch klar. Crafting Receipts ist auch klar. Divination Cards ist auch klar.
Ja. Na klar, dass er da durch.
Ja, okay.
Hier,
aber das
also
ist
Putrid Closter, Sepulcher, Waste Pool. Waste Pool ist ja nicht so schlecht gewesen, für damals zumindest. Für ein Phantasmagoria. So, Endgame Changes.
Aber guck mal, The Doctor can be found in Phantasmagoria. Das ist eigentlich auch ein Süd.
Ja.
Ist ja auch eigentlich eine Süde-Map.
Am Waste Pool, wie gesagt, auch, ne? Das,
Ja.
wenn das wieder mit Toxic Seva zusammenhängen
Ja, aber
würde.
Phantasmagoria ist noch cooler, finde ich, weil das halt. Bei Wastepool hast du immer so ein bisschen das Problem, dass das nicht ganz so geradlinig ist. Also
Ja,
es ist
aber-
auch sehr eng.
Ich sag mal,
aber
wenn Wastepool.
also für Righteous Fire sind beide Maps richtig gut.
Ich sag mal, wenn Wastepool halt wieder mit Toxic Seva zusammenhängt für Map Sustain, dann schaffelst du
Ja.
natürlich hin und her wieder die Maps, ne?
Ja.
War ja nicht so schlecht damals.
Okay, Endgame Changes.
Ja.
Profane Modifiers. Maps. Logbook Verifying Size Contracts.
Auch Cooldown Recovery Ratings ist gut. Für
Ja,
diesen.
Replays, das ist super. Das ist gut. Weil war ja für meinen Dings schau richtig schlecht. Haven Invitation Item Quantity ist das Business no longer. Provide final map boss in each map. Maven Invitation. Das Drop from Maven Invitation.
Was slightly increased.
Count Balance Change. Okay. Ja, aber du musst immer noch 10 Dinger machen, damit du halt das Ding spielen kannst, ne?
Ja.
Ach, schade. Replica Unique Items Rewards in Grand Heists no longer have a higher chance than normal to spawn with a high number of sockets and or links. Das war eigentlich mal ganz cool, weil du dadurch dann halt auch ein paar Fusings kriegen konntest. Oder halt,
Mit den
also gerade jetzt
sechs-
für Rootless war das
Sechser.
natürlich sehr interessant, ne?
Ja.
Okay, Divination Card und Voidborn. Balance of Terror from Norway obtained. Was enabled by mistake. The Iron Part Unit command will be enabled. Downwards. Oh, okay. Ja, immerhin.
Oh, dann jetzt hier. Passive Skill Tree.
Oh, jetzt kommt ja der spannendste Teil eigentlich.
Kommt das Schlimmste.
Okay, jetzt mal so. Die Maschen. Okay, Armor Mastery erstmal, das hat sich ja spannend.
Das ist was Interessantes, ja.
Plus 1 Rüstung pro 2 Stärke. Ist jetzt erstmal nicht so schlecht für einen Death Oath Charakter vor allem, weil da musst du ja mindestens 180 Stärke haben.
Hier New. Das
Das sind auch nur 90 Armor, also so viel ist das auch nicht.
der, den ich markiert habe.
Plus 1. Oha. Und vor allem to all Maximum Resistance, das inkludiert K-Auswirkung.
Ja.
Oha. Oha. Und das muss nicht mal nur Armor haben, sondern das muss einfach Armor drauf sein. Also kann auch ein Hybrid sein.
Ja.
Oh ja, das ist sehr stark. Das ist sehr stark. 20% increase armor per second you've been stationary up. What?
Hm.
Alter, wenn du mit Righteous Fire dastehst und deine komischen Dinger nur wirfst, kriegst du 100% mehr Rüstung zusammen.
Ja, von deinen 100.000 kriegst du nochmal 100.000 drauf.
Alter, das ist richtig gut für Righteous Fire. Oha. Und Mirko grinst sich schon wieder ein, ich sehe es doch. Ich sehe es.
Ich bin gespannt, was Pox aus den Notes macht.
So, wollen wir weiter gucken. Armor und Energy Shields.
Oh, nochmal übel hier, ne? Oh, 100% mehr von denen.
Ja, da gab es aber schon was Ähnliches.
Ja, kann mich auch dran erinnern.
Oh, das ist auch richtig gut. Guck mal, bei Armor und Energy Shield Mastery ist ganz unten der. 10% of Physical Damage from Hits taken as Chaos Damage.
Ja, für einen Dings ist das gut. Für einen
das ist für alle gut, Mirko. Alles was, also das ist auch für ein Dings. Ich habe ja, guck mal, ich hatte doch mit meinem Righteous Fire, hatte ich doch auch auf diesem Schild, was du mir gegeben hast, 20%.
Ach ja, da hatten wir ja auch Chaos-Dings drauf, ja.
As Fire Damage.
Ja.
Und das hatte jetzt nicht mal was mit großartig der Feuerresi großartig zu tun, sondern das ist einfach gut. Weil das funktioniert ja so, wenn du 10.000 physischen Schaden bekommst, dann bekommst du ja nur noch 9.000 physischen Schaden durch diese Geschichte hier. Und dann sind ja die 1000, die halt weggehen, die kriegst du dann halt als Chaos Damage. Und wenn du da dann 75% Resi hast, kriegst du ja nur noch 250 Chaos Schaden. Verstehst du? Also du kriegst nur 9000.
Naja.
Ja, verstehst schon.
Guck mal hier, der ist dann auch eigentlich ganz gut in Kombination.
Welcher? Der 10%, warte mal, 10% of Armor also applies to Chaos Damage. Taken from Hits. Aber das verstehe ich nicht. 10% der Rüstung. Also wenn ich 100.000 Rüstung habe.
Genau.
Was heißt denn also applies to Chaos Damage taken from Hits?
Ich hätte jetzt gedacht, dass 10% Armor Chaos Damage abfangen irgendwie. Hätte ich jetzt gedacht, ob das so ist.
Wirklich?
Also wenn du 100.000 Rüstung hast, dass irgendwie 10.000 Chaos Damage damit auch abgefangen werden.
Ja,
Was natürlich dann hiermit wieder dann relativ krass wäre, ne? Nochmal. Also in Doppelkombination. Wenn das so ist.
Also der ist richtig stark, der Stat da unten.
Oh, hier gibt's noch mehr.
Man muss halt immer gucken, ob man da auch rankommt, ne, mit seinen Builds, wo man dann halt ist.
Ja. Und guck mal hier, 8%.
Boah, der erste ist auch richtig gut.
Das hat, aber der ist ja neu, der ist ja geblieben. Ja, der hier ist, den hier meinst du? Gegen Projektilattacken.
Ja, das ist ja per Endurance Charge, das ist ja für dich gut. Also ja, genau den meine ich. Also der zweite ist für dich gut. Also für jetzt Righteous Fire, wenn du den spielst. Weil wir haben ja 6 Endurance Charges oder so auf dem Char.
Oh.
Dann hast du natürlich 48% mehr Rüstung. Aber der war ja früher auch schon da.
Guck dir den mal an.
Every 4 seconds to regenerate life. Okay, also wenn du 100.000 Rüstung hast,
No, würdest du
1% davon sind 1000. 1000 Live-Rack alle 4 Sekunden. Das sind 250 Live-Rack pro Sekunde extra.
Ja.
Gut, ja. Also wenn du 100.000 Rüstung hast.
Ja, gut, klar.
Oha, guck mal, Immune to Poison, also der letzte Stat. If equipped helmet has higher evasion rate than armor, immune to bleeding. If helmet has higher armor than evasion rating.
Ich glaube, das muss man skillen. Wenn man es kann. Für uns. Für Bleeding.
Aber wie war denn das? wenn ich jetzt zu so einem Mastery hingekommen bin, das war ja nur, ich musste immer, keine Ahnung, 10 Punkte nehmen oder bis zum Großen, hat man ja immer gemacht.
Genau.
Und dann konnte man die Mastery anklicken und dann war das ein Skillpunkt sozusagen.
Genau. Ja.
Also das hört sich auf jeden Fall sehr gut an mit da ganz unten. Weil das ist endlich eine andere Quelle, wo du Bleeding Immunity kriegen kannst.
Ja.
Oh, spannend. Ja, wie gesagt, ist die Frage, wo das dann alles liegt, ne? So, lass mal weiter.
Okay, ja, dann kommt der Tech Mastery.
Ja, ich glaube, da können wir erstmal überspringen.
Ja, Caster, Spell Damage.
Caster ist natürlich schon mal spannend. So, Final Repeat of Spells ist. Okay.
What? 50% to open nearby. What? What?
Nee. Ist ja witzig.
Oh, Chaos Mastery.
Oh, das ist auch gut. Spells which can gain Intensity have +1 zu Maximum Intensity ist auch sehr, sehr stark.
Ja, da hab ich ja nie mitgespielt mit Intensity.
Aber das gab es doch früher anscheinend schon.
Ja.
Ah ja, jetzt okay. Moment. Recover 1% of life per Wizard Debuff on each enemy you kill?
Mhm.
Nein.
Ja.
+1 zu Maximum Chaos Resi.
Mhm. Oh, 10% mehr Schaden gegen Energieschildgegner. Chaos.
Oha. Also das ist auf jeden Fall
5% Chance, wenn you inflict Wizard to inflict up to 15 Wizard Debuffs.
Aber
nur die Frage, ob du das willst.
Aber, Mirko, wo ist denn unser
Damage Buff?
4% mehr Chaos-Schaden.
Der ist raus.
Chaos-Multiplier für 4%
ja,
Chaos.
Der ist raus.
Raus, ne?
Ja.
Das hätten sie mal mit dazu machen können, was es jetzt nicht mehr gibt.
Ja. Oder removed oder move to.
Ja.
Ne?
Das letzte finde ich gar nicht so stark.
Ja, weil das ja
mit dem, wenn du das jetzt normal spielst, dann ist es ja eh so, dass du Dings hast.
Und dann bleibst du ja eh dann dran stehen, rüttelst rum und dann stackt das eh irgendwann.
Dann hast du ja schon 8 oder 9 Stacks immer von Anfang an und dann ist das ja mal pro Sekunde oder wie auch immer, geht der dann schnell hoch. Also Chaos Resi ist richtig stark. Und das ganz oben ist richtig stark. Vor allem per Wizard Debuff on each enemy you kill.
Ja.
Wenn du, Moment. Wenn ich in eine Gruppe reinlaufe, wo 10 Mobs drin sind.
Das sind 10 Wizard.
So, und ich habe standardmäßig immer 8 Wizard Debuffs.
Dann sind 80 Wizard, also müssten eigentlich 80 Debuffs sein.
Dann habe ich doch 80 Stacks.
Ja.
Das heißt, ich recover doch dann 80% meines Lebens,
so
wenn ich alle 10 Mobs töte.
So hätte ich das jetzt auch verstanden.
Völlig overpowered.
So hätte ich das jetzt aber auch verstanden.
Völlig, also ich spiele Dings hier, das Dings da hoch. Aber wobei Righteous Fire natürlich, also gerade mit diesem du bleibst stehen und die Rüstung verdoppelt sich, Mirko.
Ja.
Das ist natürlich gegen Bosse.
Mega.
Und dann machst du dir noch Arctic Armor hin.
Ja, wenn es zu viel wird, ja.
Ey,
falls es zu viel wird.
Es wird einfach wieder ein mega Spaß.
Claw Mastery können wir, glaube ich, überspringen,
ja,
ne? Cold wäre vielleicht für dich nochmal, für dein...
Oh, ja, Cold können wir kurz mal gucken.
Guck mal plus Max Cold Resistance.
Cold Exposure ist sehr gut. Das zweite von oben. Ja, Cold Resi ist jetzt erstmal nicht so schlecht. Oh, Elemental Mastery. Oder ist für dich dann weiter unten interessant?
Ja, bin ich noch nicht. Dagger Mastery ist uninteressant erstmal, ne?
Enemies for each second they ever been frozen by you up to. Okay. Hört sich auch gut an.
Ja, aber was ist denn jetzt hier das?
Jetzt ja 25% on treat enemy. Moment, jetzt ja 25% to treat enemy once elemental resistance. As inverted.
Was ist denn inverted?
Wisst ihr, was das bedeutet?
Nee.
Dass wenn der Gegner 70% Feuerresi hat.
Ja.
In sich selbst. Dann hast du eine Chance mit deinem Hit von 25% zu minus 70 Feuerresi zu machen.
Aber das Problem ist ja, dass wir nicht hitten.
Doch, du hittest mit deinen Bomben.
Mit den Bomben, ja, stimmt.
Ja.
Ja.
Das ist ja nur interessant für Bosse dann.
Ja, ja.
Aber gerade da wird es ja interessant. Das ist ja
Ja.
genau da, wo der Damage damit unter einfach fehlt, weißt
Ja, ja. Ja, oder Gruppen halt allgemein, ja.
du? Mhm.
So Energieschild Mastery.
Warte mal, 3% Chance for Hits to deal 300% of Physical Damage as extra Damage of a weapon. Okay.
Ja, da war da. Kommt noch Evasion.
So,
New.
Evasion, genau, was gibt's da noch?
Suppress.
Oh, 10% Movement Speed, wenn du keinen Schaden bekommen hast kürzlich.
Aber das hast du wohl scheinbar schon vorher gehabt.
15%. Oh, eine Evasion Rating. Oh, okay. Oh, da kommt Fire Mastery gleich noch.
Naja, da gucken wir uns danach an, nach Evasion Mastery.
Nein. Nein, Mirko.
Wo guckst du denn
Was es
jetzt
bei
schon?
Fire Mastery gibt. Ich bin schon bei Fire Mastery, entschuldige.
Der hier, der erste New.
Guck dir den dritten Starter an. Ey, das ist Mirko.
Das ist Dings hier. Profane Bloom quasi.
Ja, das ist es. Alter. Das ist ja das, weswegen ich diese Handschuhe dann, diese Asenats Gentle Touch dann anziehen wollte, weißt du? Weil die genau das drauf haben.
Also halt nur 3%, ne? Dann, aber.
Ja, aber das reicht, Mirko. Das reicht.
Oh, frech, okay.
Krass.
Guck mal das hier, was ist das? 1 life per second for each. Hä?
Na, das macht ja keinen Sinn für einen Rite of Fire
Nee.
Char.
Okay.
Oh, das ist auch sehr, sehr stark.
Wo? Was?
100% mehr Damage gegen Enemies, die ignited sind. Wir igniten doch mit unserem, mit den Bomben. Und ich glaube, ich weiß gar nicht, ob wir überhaupt kritten, aber das, was halt Schaden macht, ist doch
Der
gerade
Ignite.
diese Damage over Time, was auf dem Boden liegt. Und wenn wir 100% mehr Damage over Time machen gegen Monster, die ignited sind,
Dann wird der wieder interessant, ja.
würde ich sagen, ist das erstmal nicht so schlecht. Oh Gott, jetzt Flask Master, ich will ja nicht hingucken, weil das ist. Ja.
Was ist denn hier? Der Skill ist ja übel.
Oh, when you deal a critical strike, das ist natürlich sehr gut. Playing by Flask, enemies you kill. Okay. 4%. Okay. Das ist natürlich für mein Dings, weißt du? Für meinen Custom Damage Taken Char.
Ja, aber der ist ja an sich allgemein auch gut hier. Recover 4% auf Live, wenn
Ja,
du da
aber das
irgendwie-
Problem ist, Mirko, dass es da möglicherweise andere Sachen nicht mehr gibt, die vorher da drin
Ja,
waren. die man
ja,
braucht.
ja.
Okay, lass mal weiter. Müssen wir dann mal gucken, was wegfällt.
Fortify ist, glaube ich, nicht für uns, oder?
Nee.
Impale auch nicht. Leech auch erstmal nicht, ne?
Leech ist ja komplett neu, gab's vorher nicht.
Stimmt.
Auch 10% auf Leeches Instant ist natürlich auch richtig geil.
Ja.
Mehr Armor und Evasion ist super, mehr Damage.
Und für Leecher ist das super. Ja doch, den scheinst du doch
Ja.
schon gegeben zu haben. Hier, guck mal.
Ja, ist sehr, sehr stark auf jeden Fall. Oh, Live Masteries kommt da unten.
Ja, genau.
Oh,
Das haben
Alter,
sie
was ist denn
auch
bei Live Masteries unten? Das ist ja alles new, außer die 50 Live.
ja. Also das auch mit der Bewegung und Live-Rack ist auch weg.
Stimmt, was war das Live-Rack?
Ja, das war mal Live-Rack pro Bewegung. Irgendwas hatten wir mal gekriegt.
Ach stimmt, 2% während du dich bewegst. Ja,
Genau,
stimmt.
genau.
So, was ist das erste da? 10% more maximum life if you have at least 6 life masteries allocated. Hä?
Also wenn du alle 6 hast, wahrscheinlich gibt es insgesamt 6, kriegst du nochmal 10% mehr Leben.
Ja, wenn du das ohne ausgewählt hast.
Ja, genau. Und sind ja insgesamt 6 hier. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Ja, so, warte mal, ich muss mal jetzt kurz gucken, ob die Death O's. Ich glaube, die hatte Leben drauf. Death O's. POE. Ich glaube, da war Leben drauf. Ja, 60 bis 70 Max Leben schaffen.
Na, die Brustdome wäre natürlich interessant dann, ne? Oder auch jegliche Brust
die ist
ohne.
richtig gut dafür.
Auch jegliche Brust ohne finde ich ganz schön krass dann, ne? Mit 15% mehr Max Life, also ohne Leben.
Ja.
Aber no Life Modifiers. Und Life Modifiers ist, glaube ich, auch Live-Rig, ne? Und so eine
aber der
Späße.
Brustdome hat ja kein Live-Recht drum.
Nee, die Brustdome nicht, aber ich sag mal so, jegliche andere Brust, die du so am Anfang nimmst, ne? Da bringt dir der hier, glaube ich, jetzt nichts. Weil der da vielleicht auch auf Live-Rig drauf ist.
Ja. Also Brustdome ist da schon ziemlich Meta.
Ja.
Skills cost life instead of 30% of Mana. Skills cost life.
Na, das ist das, na, du hast automatisch den Aderlass drin. Live-Tap.
Ach nee.
Würde ich jetzt damit denken, oder?
Ja, würde ich jetzt auch denken.
Also würde ich jetzt so deuten, dass das Aderlass ist, oder nicht?
Würde ich auch so denken, ja.
Also ohne den Damage-Buff, aber...
Ja, also wenn jetzt ein Caustic Arrow 50 Mana kosten würde, würde mich das jetzt 15 Leben kosten, so versteht das.
Genau. So hätte ich das jetzt auch gedacht.
Ja.
Und du musst nicht mehr sockeln. Also du hast einen Sockel, der ist extra frei. Also du könntest statt Live-Tap was andere drin packen, ne?
Ja.
Was vielleicht mehr Schaden macht.
Ja. Okay. Spannend.
So, Link Mastery.
Da haben wir viel auszuprobieren und viel rumzuspielen. Das wären wieder lange Abende.
Link Mastery, weiß ich nicht.
Kann man überspringen.
Mana Mastery vielleicht.
Mana kann man nochmal kurz gucken.
Auch hier.
Oh, guck mal, 10%. Achso, 10% Damage, das gab es ja vorher schon.
Der hier ist gut.
Oha.
Der hier ist gut.
Oh ja.
Der ist übel.
Oha. Oh ja. Oha.
Oh ja.
Du musst erstmal zu
Du musst drin bubbeln, ne? Ja. Da ist die Frage, du hast ja auch nur eine begrenzte Anzahl an Skillpunkten, aber
das ist stark.
12 ist schon viel.
12.
Also Mine Mastery sind wir, glaube ich, raus, ne? Minen haben wir ja nicht geworfen.
Minen machen wir nicht.
Wir haben ja Traps geworfen, ne?
Traps, wenn dann genau.
Mark,
natürlich nochmal spannend werden.
Mark Mastery.
Warte mal, Mark war auch noch interessant für mein Dings. Marked Enemies, okay. Marked Enemies.
Oh, das ist ja geil.
Cannot deal critical strikes ist stark.
Ja, und das hier finde ich ist auch ganz schön stark.
Mark transfers to another enemy when marked enemies. Ja, das ist jetzt nicht so stark, weil du hast ja diese Mark on Hit halt mit drauf.
Achso.
Und wenn du einen Mob hittest, dann ist der automatisch im Mark.
Achso, na gut, okay. Ja.
Und Accuracy Rating ist jetzt auch nicht so. Also jedenfalls nicht das für das, was wir gespielt haben. Aber das Marked Enemies cannot deal critical strikes ist extrem stark.
So, Physical.
Physical. 10%. Okay, kann ich jetzt.
Also für ein Physical-Dings ist das wahrscheinlich hier auch gut.
Ach, guck mal, das ganz unten ist stark. 6% Damage over Time Multiplier for Bleeding per Impale on Enemy.
Ja.
Wenn du da irgendwie 8 Impales hast oder so, 48% Damage, also Dot Multi ist natürlich mega heftig krass. Okay, weiter. Poison Mastery. Fliegt auf nun.
Was ist das hier der einzelne neue?
Ja, auch stark. Auch cannot deal critical strikes.
Ja. Jetzt hier Protection.
Oder unten kommt gleich Reservation Mastery. Wir können nicht so schnell runterscrollen.
Der hier erstmal.
Protection Mastery. Okay, Effect of Wizard on you. Elemental Resistance cannot be lowered by curses.
Das ist ja, dann wäre es ja immun gegen diesen Elemental Weakness, ne?
Genau.
Und da wärst du doch auch, da wärst du auch nicht nur immun gegen Elemental Weakness, sondern auch minus Player Resistances.
Ja.
Aber da zählt kein Dings drin, ne? Kein Chaos, ne? Müssen wir auch dran denken. Also nur Elemental wäre verringert.
Ja.
Und dann
okay, Recovery Masteries, was haben wir da?
Das ist komplett neu, oder? Ja,
das
komplett neu.
Scheint komplett neu zu sein. 3% Chance to recover.
All life.
All life. Ja. Nicht schlecht, aber.
Ja,
ich mag immer diese 3% Chance. Ich mag Chance halt einfach nicht, weißt du?
Okay, der ganz unten.
Effects instead occur 3 seconds. Every 3 seconds consume.
Ah, der hier ist dieser Helm, den du haben konntest. Der das frisst, ne? Wo wir uns immer aufgeregt haben, dass er unsere Leichen klaut.
Ja. Nearby enemies have 50%, okay. Life recovery from regeneration is not applied every 4 seconds.
Hier 50 Live pro Sekunde Flat ist jetzt auch nicht so schlecht.
Das haben sie, ja, das ist, ja, hast du recht. War nicht früher auf einer Live-Note irgendwie mit drauf?
Nee, so war glaube ich nicht drin. Nee. Aber ich glaube so also das haben sie quasi dann hier mit drin gemacht, ne?
Ja, okay, bei Reservation Masteries ist gar nicht so viel, sehe ich gerade.
Aber hier, der ist new.
Plus
End Mana.
Oh. If you have reserved life End Mana.
Ja, aber das haben wir ja immer. Also fast immer.
Nee.
Nicht? Wegen Vitality machst du mit Dings. Mit Life. Und Mana machst du
aber
auch.
beim SOs habe ich doch kein Vitality, oder?
Was beim SOs keine Vitality?
Ich weiß es nicht mehr.
Doch, hatten wir auch. Immer. Mit drin. Aber ich weiß nicht, wie wir das gelinkt hatten.
Ach, siehst du, was bei den Live-Note gar nicht mehr mit drin ist irgendwie Vitality has 100% Mana Reservation.
Ja.
Das war ja auch immer recht stark.
Das war auch recht stark, ja.
Okay, Spell Suppression, was gibt's da Schönes? New Inflict Fire Cold when you suppress by Spell Damage. Das ist nicht schlecht. Das ist wirklich nicht schlecht. Wenn du 100% hast, prevent 1% per hit suppress recently minus sind. Verstehe ich nicht. Okay.
Der hier, den hier?
Ja, verstehe ich nicht. Oh, you have phasing if you have suppressed spell damage recently. Und 8% mehr suppressed spell damage, wenn du phasing machst. Oh, das ist sehr, sehr stark. Das ist sehr, sehr stark. Und das letzte ist auch richtig, richtig gut.
Was mit
also das vor allem, wenn du halt, wenn du suppressed spell damage halt auf 100% hast, dann brauchst du das natürlich nicht. Ja. Aber Lucky heißt ja immer, dass sozusagen, wenn du getroffen wirst,
wird ja mal
ausgewertet, bist du, hast du jetzt suppressed oder nicht, und wenn nicht, dann ist halt
nochmal ein Würfel.
Dann wird nochmal gerollt, genau.
Genau.
Okay, Stun. Okay, Stun macht ja keiner von uns. Okay, Trap Mastery. Oh, 8% Chance for Traps to trigger an additional time. Auch nicht so uninteressant. Aber gut, bei Trap Mastery waren wir, glaube ich, auch nie drin.
Wir waren da nie drin bei Trap Mastery, weil das ist auf dem anderen Baum hier, auf der anderen Seite gewesen, hier unten.
Ja.
Und hier waren wir ja drin.
Okay, weiter.
Two-Hand Mastery.
Two-Hand brauchen wir nicht, Warcry brauchen wir nicht.
Warcry, genau. Removal Masteries.
Remove Masteries, ja, klick mal auf.
Na, gucken. Armor Masteries. Ach stimmt, Determination ist raus.
Oh, stimmt, ja. Aber der Rest war Schrott. Aber Determination ist natürlich heftig. Das ist ein ordentlicher Hit.
Ja. Gehen 5%. Defiance Banner.
Defiance Banner.
Ja.
Auch nicht so geil.
Caster. Chaos Mastery, ja, hier ist er, ne? Der hier.
Ja. Ja.
Ach stimmt, hier plus Chaos Risi war ja auch immer nicht so schlecht erstmal haben, wenn man es braucht.
Mhm. Ja, und 20% Increased Effect auf Wizard ist halt auch extrem stark.
Den hat man ja oben immer hier genommen, hier auf der Seite irgendwie.
Ja, absolut. Also das ist schon für Damage jetzt ist das natürlich nicht so geil, muss ich sagen.
Ja.
Für Überleben ist das cool, aber für Damage, und das war ja immer ein Problem mit dem Death-Os, der war ja damage-mäßig schon immer nicht so stark.
Die Frage ist das drauf gekommen? Vielleicht dann in diesen komischen neuen Crucible Nodes, so eine Geschichten. Ne?
Ja,
oder ähnliche, ne? Also ich mach mal, da sind wir jetzt komplett unbedarft, weil wir das nicht wissen, was da sein kann.
Auch guck mal, bei Elemental Masteries unten ist plus 15 auf to all Elemental Resistance ist auch runter. War ja jetzt für ein Righteous Fire auch immer ganz gut, weil du nicht so leicht an die Dings rangekommen bist.
Ja.
Oh, und bei Fire Mastery ist 20% Fire Damage over Time Multi weg.
Ja, und minus 30% to feiern. Ja, aber das hier, das ist jetzt schon krass, ne? 20%.
Ja, ich meine, das hatte halt die Downtime oder die Downside halt mit dem minus 30 Fire Raising.
Ja, ja.
Da warten wir sich das. So, achso, jetzt hier Flask, würde ich gerne nochmal. Da siehst du das. Utility Flask gegen One Charge every 3 Seconds.
Ja, das fand ich ja auch immer ganz gut mit dem Charge.
Das war schon sehr stark auf jeden Fall. Ja, weil du hast ja dann Flask-Effekt und den ganzen Kram mit drauf gehabt und dann ging das ja alles viel schneller und da. Das muss man dann mal gucken, ob das noch funktioniert.
Ja, wie das denn ist. Ach hier, Live Masteries. Ah ja, genau, 10% Max und dafür Live Recovery Rate, stimmt.
Ja.
Hier Nearby Enemies, okay, das ist ja, aber ja,
Vitality. Also Vitality und das Regenerate, während du läufst, ist schon ein ziemlicher Hit, finde ich.
Das hier meinst du,
ja. Also vor allem mit Vitality ist finde ich, ziemlich
ist natürlich dann krass, dass da deutlich mehr runtergeht, ne? Vom Target, your linke Targets, Mana.
Guck mal, Clarity genauso, auch mit 100% Mana.
Ja, da haben sie echt was geändert, ne? Aber wie gesagt, da ist die Frage, was kriegst du da in deinen Items drin?
Aber das ist ja genau das, was ich liebe. Die sollen viel ändern und da muss man halt wieder viel rumfuseln. Ich will ja nicht den gleichen Bild, also ich will schon den gleichen Bild spielen, aber halt jedes Mal anders irgendwie besser.
Ja, dass man auch normal Lust hat, einen Righteous Fire zu spielen.
Ja, genau.
Protection Mastery. Achso, genau, den gab's ja auch. Genau, da kann ich mich auch noch dran erinnern.
Ach, guck mal, Skitterbots bei Trap Mastery hat auch 50%. Okay, gut, weiter.
Passive Skill Tree Cluster Changes.
Okay. Attack Cluster können wir glaube ich erstmal überspringen. Bow Cluster könnte vielleicht spannend sein.
Ja, hier Region ist natürlich auch interessant hier, ne? Vielleicht.
Kannst du Kleine ein bisschen runterscrollen?
Ja, ich bin ja dabei.
Genau, erstmal Bow Clusters fallen. Master Fletcher.
Oh, hier, der hier.
Also die mit Bow Attacks Fire an Additional Arrow ist schon extrem stark.
Und hier 10% mehr Schaden mit Bögen ist auch weg, ne?
Ja. Moment ist weg. Das Free. Achso, no longer each provide.
Und das ist jetzt hier 10%
Damage oder 10% mehr Damage over time instead they now provide. Oh, Attack Speed. Oh Mann, ey, das ist noch ein Hit.
Also Bogen ist für das auch relativ heftig nochmal reingeballert.
Ja.
Und hier hast du 102% mehr.
Besser, aber da weiß ich gar nicht, ob man da überhaupt hinkommt.
Und das ist auch 10, ja, das hatte immer, glaube ich, nie geskillt, Master Fletcher. Cold Cluster. Also das ist auch für dein Dings interessant.
Warte mal, nochmal. The 3 small passive. Warte mal, ich mach mal kurz Pass auf Building auf. Ich will kurz mal gucken, wo die Sachen so liegen, ist, ne?
Ja. Ich hol mal kurz was zu trinken. Dann sterbe ich.
Das war auch immer bei Hunters Gambit, war das doch immer. Oh nee, das ist aber irgendwo anders.
Ja, habe ich auch gedacht, bei Hunters Gambit, genau. Das
ist aber woanders, wo, was wir da gerade uns angucken. Warte mal, gucken kurz, wo Master Fletcher ist.
Ja, Master Fletcher, ja, aber das andere?
Master Fletcher. Ja, du, das ist dahin, wo Richtung Master Fletcher geht, Moko. Das ist weiter rechts unten, das betrifft uns nicht.
Haben wir Glück gehabt.
Also Hunters Gambit sollte safe sein.
Ja.
Na, zum Glück, ey.
Hunters Gambit, genau, das dachte ich, ist das.
Ja. Ja gut, erstmal weiter gucken. Wer weiß, was mich hier gleich noch erschlagen will.
Hier dein Frostding. Cold Clusters.
Oh ja, warte mal. Ja, ist nicht richtig dabei.
Ich glaube, also der hier, der ist ja, glaube ich, nur getauscht, ne? Letzten Endes. Ist ja eh nur bei dem.
Bei den Schweden, naja. Okay,
Ja.
Fortify können wir auch erstmal weglassen. Link Cluster können wir weglassen.
Marx, was hast du gerade noch erzählt?
Ja, Mark, können wir zumindest mal kurz gucken. Ja, 20% Increased Effect auf der Mark ist schon mal ziemlich stark auf jeden Fall. Mark of Prey, Mark of Prey Cluster, oder? War auch nicht schlecht, weil das 30% mehr Crit-Chance gegen Marked Enemies. Und Marked Enemies kriegen 10% mehr Schaden. Okay, gut, Poison Cluster. Können wir überspringen.
Ja.
Recovery könnte vielleicht noch spannend sein, mal gucken. Devotion Notable Passes no longer provides 5% increase in stats now. Devotion, wo war Devotion? Moment, ich muss kurz gucken. Devotion. Oh, das ist auch ein ziemlich starker immer gewesen. Das ist mit 10% Increased Max Life und 5% Increased Effect of Non-Curse Auras from your Skills. Also Determination 5% mehr Aura-Skill. Also wenn man da hingeskillt hat, könnte so ja sein, dass wir da hingeskillt haben mit Righteous Fire. Bin mir sehr ziemlich sicher, dass wir da hingeskillt haben. Also das ist auf jeden Fall auch... Warte mal, ich bin noch nicht ganz fertig. A new Circle of Life Cluster has been added. Gain 10 Life per enemy hit with attacks. Und 12% Damage taken recoup as life. Okay. Ich finde auch das zweite da oben ganz ernst.
Das hier, ne, mit dem Brink.
Ja.
Ja, das habe ich auch gerade gesehen.
Added to the sources of the dual starting the Brink of Death provides regenerate while on low life. Ich weiß gar nicht, konnte man als Low Life war ja immer, dass du 50% oder weniger hattest.
Genau.
Und hatten wir das nicht sogar mit dem Righteous Fire da durch die Arroganz-Aura oder irgendwas war da nicht irgendwas?
Nee, da waren wir noch nicht, da waren wir glaube ich noch nicht tief genug.
Okay.
Jetzt könntest du dich noch hochstellen irgendwie, dass du zählst als Lowlife bei 55%, aber auch das hast du schon nicht geschafft.
Ja, okay.
Ja, ist ja ein neuer Note gewesen oben. Bei Live.
Wird spannend. Okay, Stance können wir überspringen, Stun Avoidance Cluster können wir noch mal kurz gucken, dass man vielleicht Stun immun wird. Small passive at the entrance of the tolerance cluster no longer provides 10% chance to avoid being stunned, it now provides 7 to Chaos Resi. Oh, ist das Tolerance Cluster, ist das dieses Ding hier? Ja, sofort gefunden.
Ja, ja, schon viel plus Chaos Resi. Siehst du das hier?
Ja, ich hatte nur das eine gerade gelesen.
Toleranz.
Tolerance notable has no avoid being stunned, no instead has. Oh ja, also Chaos Resi kannst du ganz gut tun.
Hier nochmal.
Also Tolerance ist das, wo wir da immer hochgeskillt hatten, um so ein bisschen Bleeding-Immunität mal zu bekommen. Ist, ne?
Ja, ja, ich kann mich dran erinnern.
More passive that provides. Das ist ja alles Chaos Resi.
Ja.
Okay, was ist denn ein Faltering? Notable passive skill is no longer provides regen. Now provides 10% damage taken from stunning hits is recovered as life. 10% stun. Okay. Arcane Sanctuary notable passive no longer.
Oh, das ist aber auch nicht gut.
A new trail. Klar. Ja, aber da sind wir eh nie gewesen, Moko, glaube ich. Unfiltering. Ich guck mal kurz. Unfiltering. Nee, du Mirko, das ist zwar auch beim Righteous Fire da, wo man reinskillen könnte, aber da haben wir nie reingeskillt, also ist safe.
The One with Evil, wo war das?
The One with Evil war doch das plus 1 Chaos Crazy Ding, ne?
Ja, weil der ist weg.
Oh. Warte kurz, ich guck noch mal kurz. Evil. Aber ich glaube, das war das rechts, diese plus 1 Chaos Crazy. Ja. Genau. Das ist das, wo du dann manchmal reingegangen bist, extra.
Ja, genau. War mir doch so, dass ich den kannte irgendwie, den.
Ja, weil da gab es doch viel Chaos Resi, ne? 11
Ja,
jeweils,
genau.
Clan und dann nochmal 23 plus 1 Max Chaos Resi.
Ja.
Okay, gut. Interessiert mich nicht eigentlich nie in das Gilt. Cast und dann. Okay, gut, weiter.
Warcries.
Warcry.
Hatten wir doch auch mal den da genutzt hier, den welcher war das?
Ja, mit diesem Feuerding.
War das Ancestral?
Nee. Nee, das ist keiner da mit dabei, den wir hatten, glaube ich. Unser hieß anders.
Aber ist ja auch ein Cluster. Wir haben ja nicht in den Cluster, glaube ich, drin geskillt, ne?
Ja, ich glaube, genau. Ich glaube, da können wir auch drüber scrollen.
Ja, Ascendancy Changes.
Okay, Saboteur können wir überspringen.
Pfadfinder.
Pfadfinder können wir auch überspringen. Und die anderen auch irgendwas.
Ascendant.
Oh, Ascendant.
Ja klar, das ist natürlich angepasst. Logisch.
Achso, ja, okay.
Ne, ist ja logisch, wenn sie hier die Klassen anpassen, dass sie das auch anpassen.
Ja.
Yearly Game Changes.
Ja.
New Games. Achso, wegen den neuen Games dann, ne?
Okay, geh mal. Ja, das interessiert mich jetzt nicht. Geh mal zu Skill Balance.
Ja.
Da wird's spannend.
Melee Splash. Kann man, glaube ich, ignorieren.
Ja, aber Blight wäre vielleicht. Blight now. Base Durations. Okay, haben sie erhöht, haben sie verbessert, Blight.
Aber hält, ist kürzer, ne? Die Duration. Also.
Ja.
Ne? Also ist kürzer, aber macht mehr Schaden.
Ja, aber
auch Explosive
dieses
Trap.
komische Chaos-Ding, was du nach vorne in so einem
Trichter. Ja, genau, das ist das Ding. Ja.
Was ist denn da mit Duration? Keine Ahnung.
Weiß ich auch nicht.
Explosive Traps. Okay. Ist nicht so schlimm mit Level 20
ja, immer noch 7 ist Stunden. Nur Leveling. Ich glaube, Shattering Steel hatten wir auch nicht. Splitting Steel hatten wir nicht. Oh, Spark. Oh, Spark haben sie. Ja.
Ist aber safe.
So Timer, Spectral Throw, Lightning Ten, Explosive. Ne, ich glaube, da kommen wir
hier. Onslaught Support.
Ja.
Onslaught Support has been removed. A new Momentum Support Game has been added in its place. Gehst nochmal bitte hoch zum Momentum, ich will nochmal kurz lesen, was ich kann.
Wo war denn das hier? Also hier steht erstmal, wo es offert ist. Ich muss X suchen, dann nochmal Momentum, ja.
Ja, nee, hier steht nur da. Ich glaube, das kommt später erst noch Mirko vielleicht. Ja, dann lass es mal weitermachen.
Da?
Achso, da war das. Support. Attack skills that aren't triggered using those skills will grant momentum. This is lost when you move. Hä?
Aber mehr steht da nicht, das ist ein bisschen wenig, wa?
Supports attack skills that aren't triggered.
Ja.
Using those skills will grant momentum, which is lost when you move. Ja, wenn ich mich bewege, das ist doch wie bei Onslaught. Wenn ich mich bewege, will ich doch schneller sein. Ah, okay. Weiter. Ja, ich glaube, da geht es auch um Attack Speed dann halt, ne? Okay, ja, müssen wir mal weiter schauen.
So,
Weiter
hier waren
runter.
wir. So. Oh, hier, guck mal, hier steht. This does lower the yearly game movement speed potential of some builds.
Ja. Das haben sie ja vorhin auch im Dings gesagt, dass sie das haben wollen, dass die Speedrunner dass es nicht immer halt sich alle gleich anfühlt, weißt du? Deswegen haben sie da den halt rausgenommen. Aber
Ja.
steht jetzt da, has been removed.
Hier steht Items that
Gibt's
previously
gar nicht
granted
mehr,
onslaught
ja.
support, such as Forbidden Charcoal and Hungry Loop unique items, now instead
Ja.
grant Momentum Support, ja. Also gibt's nicht mehr.
Ja.
Oh, Attack and Bow based Leveling. Faster Attack Support.
Ja, das ist einfach nur, dass die Sachen bei anderen Quests.
Ja, ich sehe schon.
Aber hier steht auch da, has now level, und da stehen auch Sachen, ne, up to 4 und previously 3 und so, also die haben da schon ein bisschen was geändert. Wobei alle relativ im Endgame immer unchanged zu sein scheinen.
Ja, nur dass das Leveling sich anders anfühlt wahrscheinlich.
Ja, das ist alles noch unter dem Block Early Leveling. Okay, dann scrollen wir ein bisschen runter, da scheint jetzt erstmal nichts dabei zu sein, was wir benutzen.
Zepter.
Ja, ist wahrscheinlich ähnlich. Oh, Wand und Vendor Receipt Changes. Okay, weiter.
Oh, hier ist der Dings mit drin, mit dem Verkaufen.
Ja, guck mal. Nee, scheint nicht mehr dabei zu sein. Hier weiter.
Account Search. Ja, Player Balance. Oh. Oh. Molten Shell. Ist angepasst. Das ist ein ganz schöner Nerv.
Ja, wobei 10% up to Maximum auf. Ja, also ist jetzt für ein Righteous Fire ist das schon. Weil da kannst du ja auch 100.000 Rüstung haben und halt 10.000 Schild bekommen.
Ja.
Und dann ist 20%. Achso, und das sind auch nur 10% auf Your Armor, ist nicht mehr 20% auf Your Armor. Okay,
ja, ist die Hälfte jetzt quasi, ne?
Dann ist das ja für alle ein Dings. Wobei ich jetzt so sage, wenn ich früher 50.000 Armor hatte und 20% und konnte dann halt auf 100.000 kommen, ja, nee, dann ist das für alle ein Dings, ja.
Ja.
Oh ja, das ist, okay.
Das wird interessant. Ob das dann immer noch ist oder ob man dann irgendwas anderes drin hat, ne?
Ja, muss man dann mal sehen, genau. Okay, Projectiles, bla bla bla. Element Explode, One Strike, Power Charges now provide 50% Critical. Oh, das ist gut. Für einen Power Charge Stacker. Winter Orb. Sehr stark. 50% anstatt 40. Corruption Notable Passive. Provide high damage boost. Oh, warte mal. Corruption? So, now provides. Alter, das ist ja auch schon wieder ein Nerf für Dings. Wo ist das mit Corruption Notable Passive Skill?
Ja, wo ist der? Achso,
das war der da oben. Das war der oben links, wo wir einmal Rin geskillt haben.
Ja.
Damit wir den Wizard-Effekt halt mitgenommen haben.
Ja, der ist ganz schön 15% genervt, ne?
Ja. Scheiße. Okay.
Oh.
Okay, Item Balance. Oh, das ist ja auch ein ganz schöner Hit für die ganzen High-Roller da.
Ja. Okay, no longer roll.
Ja, das ist glaube ich nicht so schlimm. Höchste Level und so. Oh, Moment. Book of Regression kann nicht mehr erstellt werden?
War der alles resettet?
Ich glaube, das war der diese hier Alira und Dings gemacht hat, oder? Warte mal, guck mal. Book of Regression. It reduces your character level by 1 and resets your experience for that level to 0. Okay. Ah. Weißt du, warum sie das rausgenommen haben?
Ja.
Es gibt irgendwie die Möglichkeit, halt mal gesehen, das ist so eine Farming-Strategie gerade am Anfang, wo du Heists spielst.
Ja.
Und zwar machst du das so, dass du dann halt immer spielst, bis du halt ein Level hochkommst und dann kannst du neue Contracts kaufen, an die du ja am Anfang relativ schwer rankommst.
Ja.
Und dann setzt du dein Level wieder 1 zurück und spielst dann sozusagen nochmal wieder dieses Level, damit du nicht zu hoch im Level bist. Also ich glaube nicht über 68 willst du kommen oder so, weißt du?
Ja.
Und dann kriegst du immer diese Low-Level-Contracts und kannst immer wieder Level und machst wieder zurück und kannst wieder neues Level und machst wieder zurück. Und dadurch kannst du halt dir diese Low-Contracts immer relativ leicht dann holen.
Ach so.
Also so halt irgendwie eine Erinnerung, dass das auf jeden Fall mal so eine Farming-Strategie war. Möglicherweise haben sie das deswegen drin genommen. Okay, Monster Balance. The unique drop chunks from Katarina has been rebalanced. Okay. Powerful minions, monsters modifier has been split into 2 different modifiers. Opponents which buffs the life and damage and constantly revives minions each block. Okay. The towers Herald in the lava lake now spawn as magic instead of rare.
Ja. Da wird.
Lava Lake, Mirko.
Aber das wird zum Ehen dann leichter wahrscheinlich.
Ja, aber dafür droppt nicht mehr so viel.
Aber
ja,
dafür ist der Drop niedriger, genau.
Ja.
Den ist das wahrscheinlich Euro für fallen, ne?
Absolut. The rare monster modifier that triggers purple crystals when the monster is hit now has larger. The crystals have slightly longer delay before exploding after the monster dies. The crystals now deal chaos damage instead of elemental damage.
Ah, diese Kristalle, ja.
Ja, das ist gut. Und vor allem have had der Damage lower, das ist wichtig.
Ja. Ah, diese Kristalle waren ja
bei
nervig.
Necromancers are no longer removed upon their death. Okay.
Ah, hier Ruthless.
Oh, Ruthless. Voidstones now upgrade maps in Ruthless. Voidstones? Also.
Na, Voidstones sind die da unten, die vier.
Upgrade. New maps by less than. Okay. Eternal Orbs. Ruthless no longer has alternative levels. When you start finding 4, 5 and 6 Hobbit items. Necessary to progress your Atlas in Ruthless. We've increased the base drop chance for maps in Ruthless. Change the Atlas passive so they now provide maps found have 8% chance to be 1 tier higher, previously 10. The otherworldly okay. With the chances for Kira to offer unique or synthesis maps is an available mission. Oh. Only drop Jewelry instead of an item which was not. Yes, in high school now have a preferred minimap items. Okay. Okay.
Aber da muss ich ganz ehrlich sagen, überzeugt mich nicht, weiterhin Ruthless mal nochmal zu spielen.
Nee, muss ich auch sagen.
Die Änderung.
Also Dropchance for Wall-Orbs increased finde ich schon mal gut.
Ja, das ist gut.
Aber kein Alchemie erhöht, kein anderes irgendwas erhöht.
Ja.
Ja, okay, weiter. Kira Click Mods, weiter. Was kann man alles aufrollen?
One of these options. Okay, das ist ja weiterhin.
Essenz kann man draufrollen, das ist gut, Mirko. Das ist
Aber
gut für uns.
kein Harbinger. Harbinger gibt's nicht mehr.
Harbinger gibt's nicht, das stimmt. Aber Essenz für 3 Chaos ist natürlich super.
Harvest, aber kostet 12 Chaos, aber Harvest.
Ja, das kriegen wir
Also
auch so.
kannst du, glaube ich, einfach eine Kirak-Map starten.
Ja.
So, heißt.
User Interface Changes. Okay, mal gucken.
Edit one.
Edit an option to hide your account's email address. Ah, finde ich auch gut.
Ja.
Für die Streamer und so ist der cool, dass du das nicht mal zeigen musst. Okay.
Ja, vielleicht ist das doch der Grund gewesen, warum das bei dir mit dem Hack gestartet ist. Weiß ich nicht. Aber das hat er eigentlich nicht angezeigt. Du streamst ja nicht.
The alt required for allow at the bottom of the skill program when holding the highlight item. Moment, the oil required for anointing.
Na, das ist das, was du da schon gesehen hattest.
No, also displayed. Achso, ja. Lily and the user shop are now color coded. Okay, added ability release captured beast. Bestial pen.
Hab ich auch gesehen, ja.
Okay. Item filter changes. Added a new has implicit condition for item filters which can be used to filter by items that have at least one implicit modifier. Okay. Bug fixes.
Dann Bugfixes.
Fix the bug when the cost weg and uninteressant. Fix the bug when it was possible to cause yourself self-damage. Fix the bug where empower support would show a support letter on skill granted or as a secondary effect. Bla bla bla. Poster. Bla bla bla. Moment, war das hier mit Irikaki? Fix the bug when for eine Legion. Okay, kann man ignorieren. Fix the bug error skill offering. A bisschen Jewel. Raging Spirit. Bla 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 bla. Bla 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 bla. Okay, weiter. Mach mal mehr weiter, bitte.
Oh! Fix the bug. Party player high contact could drop for players that had not encountered. Das hab ich gesehen.
Mhm. Okay, weiter. Okay, das scheint gewesen zu sein, ne?
Der scheint gewesen zu sein. Leider keine.
Ja.
Leider keine.
Also, es wird spannend auf jeden Fall. Es wird spannend.
Aber
Aber ich sag mal so, der Rapid Fire fühlt sich jetzt für mich an, dass er keinen Nerf hat. Vielleicht die 20% Feuer-Multiplier.
Ja, Vitality teurer.
Gut, ja, aber dafür hat man eine andere Möglichkeit, vielleicht noch an Dings
Na,
ranzukommen.
also ich sag mal, wir sehen ja jetzt halt die Items nicht, was die haben können, ne? Das ist halt diese
Ja.
Krux noch.
Ja, und spannend wird natürlich noch, welche Unix kommen und alles, ne?
Ja, und was sich Pox ausdenkt.
Ja. Oh, die hat doch schon 1000 Kommentare natürlich wieder mal.
Naja.
Im Forum.
Ja, Wahnsinn. Da muss man dann halt mal gucken, ne, wie sich das alles dann auch spielt und was man vielleicht anderes dann skillt.
Ja, das, mit Molten Shell ist natürlich ziemlich krass, ne?
Ja, mit den Reservation Masteries, ne, ist halt.
Ja.
Ja, für Chaos hier, das mit Chaos Multiplier ist richtig übel.
Mhm. Ja, also das Oath ist dann doch ziemlich getroffen, muss ich sagen. Mit
Ja,
den ganzen Blizzard-Geschichten und
ja.
das dann noch dazu.
Ja, man muss dann testen, ne, was kommt dann wirklich auch rein, ne, das. Man kriegt denn hier immer hier mit Diablo 4 Standard Edition. Ich glaube, man muss das einfach mal testen dann, ne? Also ich sag mal zum Beispiel mit diesen 3% Chance mit den Exploding. Jetzt so nicht schlecht. Einige andere Sachen, die haben wir ja auch gesagt, die sind cool, dass die reinkommen, aber man muss halt gucken, ob man die so skillt dann, ne?
Ja.
Ja, Onslaught.
Ja gut, Onslaught ist ja nur der Gem raus, Mirko. Ist nicht komplett raus, ne?
Doch.
Nein, das ist nur der Gem raus, Mirko.
Ich dachte, der Skill ist auch weg.
Ja, der Skill als Gem ist raus.
Achso, Onslaught Support. Okay, ja. Ja, okay. Also kannst du nicht mehr sinnvoll mit Onslaught Support machen, weil der weg ist. Aber Onslaught gibt's noch. Zum Rufcasten oder so. Rufcasten.
Ja.
Also bist du nicht ganz hoffnungslos verloren.
So sieht's aus.
Ja, da kann man nur gespannt sein, wie gesagt, was sich die Leute ausdenken, ne, für Builds und so weiter, ob man da was nimmt oder nicht nimmt. Wie gesagt, für mich, ich habe ja den Vorteil, dass ich noch einen Pox habe, der sich da ewig und 3 Jahre auskaspert mit wie mache ich den besten Righteous Fire Bild. Da muss man natürlich sagen, da hat der Pox natürlich auch sehr vorgelegt mit detaillierten Beschreibungen, ne, was du ab welcher Stufe wie machen sollst. Das fand ich ganz angenehm. Was hat eigentlich der Ziggy die mit Path of Exile da hier mit Chris Wilson? Was hat denn ständig sehe ich den immer am Ende. Das ist irgendwie der Liebling da von Chris Wilson geworden. Ja, kann man sich halt nur überraschen lassen, ne? Bin ich ganz ehrlich, also. Auch wie sich das anfühlt zu spielen, ne? Und wie man jetzt dann auch die Reservation-Dinger da irgendwie sich zusammenbaddelt, weil, also ich sag mal zum Beispiel, hier steht ja auch nichts von wegen irgendwie Determination reserviert jetzt weniger Mana oder so. Ja.
Ja, spannend wird wirklich sein, was du dann halt auf diesen Waffensachen da halt drauf haben kannst. Ne?
Ja.
Und ob du dann auch einige Sachen dann kompensiert. Vielleicht hast du da auch sowas drauf wie irgendwie. Also, was ich ja schon gesehen habe, war dann irgendwie Grace has more Aura Effect. Dann gibt es sicherlich auch sowas wie mit Determination has more Aura Effect.
Ja.
Und vielleicht gibt es dann auch irgendwas mit Determination has 25% more Mana Efficiency. Blablabla.
Aber der mal recht interessant ist, ne, ist ja hier zum Beispiel, ich hab nochmal hochgescrollt hier mit diesem plus 1 All, Max Ele Resis und Resis, Max Resis. Ja. Kann man sich dann nur überraschen lassen. Mit dem Live-Tab fand ich zum Beispiel auch ganz cool, ne? Den Skill. Also diesen. Bei der Live-Mastery. Weil das macht natürlich nochmal. Macht zwar den Damage-Buff dann vielleicht weg. Ja. Aber dafür kannst du ja den anderen Stein drin machen. Der vielleicht auch einfach mehr Damage macht. Den du aber nicht gemacht hast, weil du auf diese Geschichte gegangen bist, dass das halt Mana kostet, dass es Leben kostet anstatt Mana.
Ja. Jo. Alter, hast du 23:44 Uhr? Ach du Scheiße. Gut, Moko. Ich muss ins Bett.
Ja, alles klar, Dirk.
Alles klar.
Dann gute Nacht.
Hören wir uns möglicherweise morgen Abend. Müssen wir mal gucken.
Ja.
Vielleicht gucken wir auch mit Judo noch eine weitere Folge Avengers.
Gut, alles klar, Dirk.
Also,
Jo, bis dann.
Schlaf gut, ciao.
Jo, ciao. So, ihr Lieben. Und ich bin dann auch weg. Ich wünsche euch eine gute Nacht. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen. Fürs Vorbeikommen. Lasst mir gerne hier einen Follow da, kostet nichts. Schaltet gerne mal auf meinen YouTube-Kanal. Ist hier verlinkt im Twitch-Kanal. Und dann würde ich sagen, bis morgen. Dort spielen wir natürlich wieder Last Epoch. Wahrscheinlich dann noch die ganze kommende Woche, außer den Freitag, weil da wird ja dann die Season starten in Path of Exile. Und dann werden wir da natürlich durchstarten und gucken uns das Ganze an. Und ja, dann bis morgen. Ciao.